Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. We're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show for an evening edition. We don't normally do this kind of thing on a Saturday night, but here we are. We dim the lights a little bit, and we're doing a Saturday night special. A little play on words there for you guys. It is Saturday, April the 6th, 2024, and we're rolling live right now on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. If you guys want to join us, if you are hanging out over on X, and if you saw it over here on Twitter, you want to say, hey, I want to jump into the chat with all these crazies. They're already talking. You might as well get over here. Jump on into rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Make sure you give us a like, a follow while you are there. Okay, if you guys are familiar with this program, what you know is we always talk about that I'm a constitutional extremist, and it says that I'm a Second Amendment defender. You may not know that I actually got tossed out of the FBI over Second Amendment affairs. We're going to probably talk about that just a little bit, but I really want to bring on and highlight a story of a gentleman that I've come to know through playing around on Twitter, because that's where I spend a bunch of time, like I probably shouldn't. And his name is Dexter Taylor. He's been on a couple of major programs, but not nearly enough. His story is the story of all of us, and he's made me change my mind about one thing in particular: that we should just ignore the ceded territories in America. And those ceded territories are captured places like New York and California. And for all of you who live north of Virginia on the eastern seaboard that look like you're losing your Second Amendment rights and you sort of just said it's over, this man is in the fight for it right now. His court case is relevant to all of us, and I want to make sure that we bring him on and have that chat. So without any further ado, without any sponsorship reads or anything else, we're going to just start talking to my new friend, Dexter Taylor. There he is. How you doing, sir? Good evening.
How's it going, brother? Good to see you.
It's going well. Okay, so we should probably put this up front. It is possible, because I don't censor anybody, men who are facing persecution by the government sometimes have saltier language than men who are not. And I've had I had one of the guys from the Whitmer case come in here, and he got framed up pretty good by the federal government, and he had some aggressive language. So if it gets aggressive, we're gonna let people know right up front that if you got little kids in the room, it's bedtime. Put them to bed. That's what needs to happen, because some men are going to be talking about some things that are difficult and uncomfortable. But without any further ado, let's get into your story. But I want to start from the very beginning, if you don't mind. I'd like to give people a lens of where you're coming from and who you are as a person. Will you tell people where you grew up?
Sure. I grew up in New York. I was born in Queens, New York. I grew up there, Hollis, Queens. And lived in New York all my life, except for 7 years where I lived in Baltimore. And, I went down there to go to school, and then I dropped out and bounced around for a little while trying to get myself together. And then I got into computers. I taught myself C++ and got my first job in the industry in 1994. Moved back to New York to work for a startup. And I've been working in the software industry ever since. And I still write code every day.
And you still write code every day. That's your bread and butter.
Every day. Yes, sir.
And
although I'm not working now.
Yeah, understood. I think we're going to get there.
Yeah.
And you live in New York forever. Are you a guy that gets into trouble in New York? Do you go out there looking for fights, looking for altercations on the street? What kind of guy are you?
I keep my black ass home.
I told you guys it was going to get spicy right away.
Listen, I ain't like nothing good happens outside the club at 1 a.m. You know what I'm saying? So I'm home in my studio. You see I'm sitting in the control room of the switching yard. This is the third recording studio I built. And so I'm usually, messing around at the studio or working on code or something like that. In fact, I have we'll get to that later. But I have a software demo I want to show for you.
Okay. I'm up for it.
But no, never any trouble with the law. Squeaky clean criminal record. I have one arrest for trespassing that happened in Baltimore, something like 30 years ago. Other than that, squeaky clean. No like police coming to my house, nothing like that. And as you know, I'm a conservative, so I'm not out here, talking the crazy stuff.
You're already on the radar for that.
They're watching. I mean, we'll get to that. But yeah, they're watching my social media, and I'm delighted that they are.
Oh, for sure. Hopefully we red pill some of these clowns that are out there looking at it. And I just mean I want them to see the truth. I'm not asking anybody to change a political party.
That's right.
The reason I bring that up, and it's interesting that you mentioned you got one arrest for trespassing. I also have one little blemish in my record, and I still managed to have a top secret clearance and work for the FBI. There's something funny about having a conversation with somebody, knowing what it's like to spend a night in jail, knowing what it's like to be on the other side of things, to find yourself in trouble, having to face the wall and put your hands through the bars and all that kind of thing, which I got to do when I was in the military. It was stupid, but it happens. And there's a certain amount of empathy that you develop for knowing that there's another human being there with a whole story that they don't know anything about, that you don't know anything about when you're on the cuffing side of it. So I always thought that was actually an important thing, that a lot of people don't have that experience in law enforcement.
Yes. That's right.
In any case, right. but a trespassing charge 30 years ago is negligible. That's a nothing. You're not a troublemaker. You're not a man, and yet you find yourself looking down the barrel of a pretty significant prison sentence if things go sideways, if the state of New York gets the way that they are arguing right now. Do you want to lay out the specifics of your case now that we kind of briefly touched who you are?
Sure. So, aside from being an online conservative, some years ago I got disgusted with the left and started something called foundationism, and we can talk about that later. I make stuff. Like, I love making stuff. I love building stuff. I make my own furniture. I have a workshop in my basement. I taught myself how to weld. I learned carpentry from my old man. I saw him when we bought our first house. It was a handyman special, and I saw him gut and renovate that house from the inside out, room by room. So I've always loved making stuff. And when I was a kid, I always loved weapons, tanks, planes, rifles, this, that. I just loved it all, like any red-blooded American kid. A few years ago, I got into gunsmithing. I found out that there were people who were buying legal parts, with what they called 80% receivers, machining them to completion, adding parts, and coming up with finished weapons. And I was hooked. So I went and I started buying legal parts online under my own name, shipped to my house. And I started building weapons. I started out with Glock-style pistols, and then I built 8 very sweet AR-style rifles. At the time, I thought, this is great. This is going to be my second career. I'm getting kind of old in this business. But the 2A people I had come across were really cool people. And there was this kind of whole DIY atmosphere to the 2A community that I really liked. And you and I talked before about people like Bill Geisley, who I really looked up to, who got his first contract building triggers for the U.S. Army sharpshooting team. Like, I love that guy. Kevin,
and let's just dig into Bill. Let's just talk Bill Geisley for 1 second, because his background is not like, he's not like a guy that grew up doing firearms. He was a mechanical engineer, and he approached it from a different way, in the same way that you have that software background and sort of that problem solving through code, which is very logic based. Bill Geisley came at it and was like, hey, I know material science. Why are you guys using the materials you use? Why aren't you using these processes? And so he came at it from a different way. I just, the explosion of interest in, as you said, the sort of DIY atmosphere, but also sort of that injection of new backgrounds and looking at existing problems and saying, why do we assume that it has to be a Remington 700 platform? Why can't we just start from scratch and build something with a bolt? If we're going to manually feed a gun, then why don't we do it the way that we might do from scratch? So this attitude is very new. Exactly. It's in my lifetime. It's in your lifetime that people have started doing this. It's very cool. So anyway, I think that's something that's happening in the gun world right now. And guys like you are, and Bill Geisley is maybe further back down the line, but we're getting there where people are just bringing novel ideas and backgrounds to the gun world.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's that guy up in New Hampshire, Kevin, I want to say Brittingham from Q
I
Firearms.
got some
He
cues.
got a contract with Special Forces. Yeah, I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm making I'm making American firearms in the traditional way, which is in an American home.
Hmm.
So anyway, I got into doing this stuff. All the time I was doing it, I never brandished, I never took pictures, I never took videos, I never talked about it online, I never, because that wasn't the kind of energy I was interested in. I kept it quiet and private. Um, and while I was doing it, I was doing my prep work. I applied for membership in my local gun range, passed the criminal background check at my local gun range, West Side Rifle and Pistol in Manhattan. Uh, Took their beginning training course. Took their training course for the Utah concealed carry permit. Got my fingerprinting done, all that stuff. Subscribed to a service called Rocket FFL to learn about the different kinds of FFLs and what I would need to apply for, what the process would be in order to do this thing legitimately for money.
Yep.
And I had all these plans. I was going to buy a piece of land in southern New Hampshire, and set up a gun lab there and develop some of these products and systems that I've talked with you about before. And we can talk about that tonight if you want. And then in April of 2022, I got raided by a joint NYPD ATF task force. Basically, SWAT team broke my door down, arrested me, hauled me off to Rikers Island, where I spent a week. My bail was almost $250,000. My family had to put their house up to get me out. And the state of New York has charged me with several counts of felony weapons possession. And if they get their way, I'm looking at 18 years in prison.
Let's talk about the raid for starters, because I don't want to
Sure.
walk past that. I think that's a real thing that exists in the fear in the hearts of some people, and it should be something that people can internalize. Where were you when the knock happened?
There was no knock.
Perfect. Where were you when there was no knock?
It was a no-knock warrant.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you know about those. I was in bed. I had gone to sleep the night before listening to an audiobook, and I woke up hearing voices that were not the audiobook. And the violence of action, police search warrant, blah, blah. And the first thing I said was, hello, my name is Dexter Taylor. I live here. Who are you guys looking for? Because I thought they had the wrong house, right? It never occurred to me that the state of New York would be like, we have to get this guy. Do you know what I'm saying? Anyway, played it cool, got arrested like a professional. No harsh words or anything like that.
Hold on, like a professional. You were a gentleman. You weren't getting arrested like a professional. Professionals get arrested all the time. We got to be specific.
That's true.
I've seen people who get arrested like professionals. They're like, "Hey, man, what's up? Hey, I saw you before."
No problem.
Yeah, you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be arrested like a professional. You want to be arrested like a gentleman. And
like a gentleman, yeah.
Okay, and so you went peacefully, and you didn't resist anything. No problems with that.
Nope. Had a nice conversation with the officers in the car on the way to the 83rd or the 84th or whatever that was.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, right. Yeah. One of the guys, I think his cousin does Python programming. So it's like we talked about that.
They're like, oh, you're into code. Like, cool. Like, why are we at your house? Like, how did that happen? And what's also worth knowing for people who haven't experienced this, and you're going to have a lot more insight than most, but a lot of times the people that are doing the search warrant or doing an arrest warrant have very little to do with the case. They got a quick brief. This guy's got a bunch of guns. We're going after the Brooklyn Arsenal. This is what's happening next. We're kicking the door. He's super dangerous. And then they go, oh, he's actually like a really nice guy, and he sounds like a computer programmer. He's got some pretty cool stuff in that house, and looks like he's doing some recording. That's weird. And then they go back to their jobs, and they never think about it again.
Never think of exactly.
And your life, meanwhile, is in wreckage.
Is in wreckage. That's right. It's like one funny thing I just thought of was one of the cops at the precinct, when I was in the holding cell, and every now and then someone would come back and let me go to the bathroom, whatever, and get a drink of water. The guy, I forget his name, but he said, we went. It's like we had some back and forth, and he said, "Well, everyone says you're a nice guy, so I'm going to try to figure out what's going on." Do you know what I'm saying?
There's always one guy that wants to white knight the situation, right? He's like, maybe we did get the wrong guy.
God bless him. Listen,
yeah, there should be more of that.
But yeah, so yeah, felony weapons possession. Hang on a second, I'm just pouring some more beer.
This is the right move right now. I almost poured myself a beer, but if I drank a beer with you, I'd be going to sleep in the middle of this, and I don't want to do that. I want to stay sharp, so I got water. Let's talk about how it came to be that a man who ordered things off the internet legally in his own name was suddenly on the radar of the NYPD, who had no otherwise probable cause to believe that something was going on in a place that you're not advertising these weapons. Let's talk about the specifics of how that goes down.
Sure. So ATF has been going around the country to various parts manufacturers and more or less demanding customer lists. And some of those manufacturers, some of those online retailers complied. And then ATF would take that list of people and go around to local police departments and say, get this guy, get this guy, get this guy. And of course, it depends on which jurisdiction, because, for example, if I lived in Texas, this wouldn't have been a problem. I mean, in fact, if I lived in Texas, I probably would have been doing side work, like helping the sheriff's deputies maintain their hunting weapons. Or, you know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, they would have probably had come to some of my barbecues or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But like, just being New York, that's how it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how it happened. NYPD, as a matter of fact, has a dedicated unit to liaise with ATF for just that purpose, right? So when they have like an ATF, they call it, I think they actually call it a ghost gun unit.
Oh, perfect.
So yeah.
Now those are the ones that can shoot the 30 caliber magazine clips.
Don't start. Don't start with it.
It's so bad. How is it that the people that know the least about the thing that we love and like and get excited about are the ones that are the most interested in telling you how dangerous it is?
I saw that. I think we all saw that video of the ATF guy like trying to field strip a Glock, like literally the possibly the simplest pistol that you could possibly field strip. And
That's
it was
it.
like he couldn't do it.
Did you see the Garand Thumb answer to that?
No, I didn't.
So you know who Grand Thumb is, right?
Yeah,
he's a
yeah.
gun tuber.
Awesome
If you guys don't know who he is, they call him, Flannel Daddy. And so he's a former Air Force guy, and he has this gun channel. It's a big channel. They do a lot of fun stuff. They've got a good sense of humor. It's very similar to the kind of sense of humor of the guys that I worked with when I was in the military. Yeah. And so he lines up maybe 12 or 13 Glock pattern firearms.
I did see that. And he like field stripped
and he was like, let's see how many I can do before the ATF head of weapons does.
Their one little Glock, right.
So he goes through them and he's like, field strip, strip, and he's just dropping them because he doesn't give a shit because he's got probably all the money in the world and all the guns in the world too. So he's dropping all these things that you and I would not be dropping. And when he gets finished with doing it, he's like, it's like 12 of them. I'm out of Glocks. Get fucked, ATF. And he's just so mad. But it's the same way that I felt in my heart too, watching this guy. I'm like, who is this scumbag that is in charge of our weapon program? What should get back to doing tax stamps, dude? How about you stamp out all the tax stamps and make sure that people get their suppressors they paid their own money for, and they're willing to give the government $200 just for the right to possess their own property? I get real passionate about this stuff. People don't want to see me offline. I get heated. I hate capital. I let the ATF own me a little bit with the hatred that I have for them. Like I gave them the right to make me angry, and I don't like to be that way. And I'm angry for your case too. So they've got a ghost gun unit, and they've liaised with these guys. And even though there is no good reason why the NYPD specifically would be able to know anything about it because of the federal overlap.
Correct.
We are now dealing with the NYPD is now in a place where they are lawfully was ATF wasn't even on your search warrant, were they?
I don't know if they were on. I don't think they were on the search warrant.
You didn't see anybody with like ATF police written on their chest?
On the day of the raid, they were there. I saw 2 people with ATF windbreakers.
Okay,
and they vanished immediately thereafter. Like we never saw ATF again. So
do you know why they had to be there?
I don't know. No.
Because they were there. They were the probable cause to get in. Gotcha. I'm sure of it, right?
Gotcha.
So the ATF was the one that generated that. So they want to make sure that they're there. And now that the task force that's with them is part of that search, now they're in a position legally to be able to see things that are against state law, even though they're not federal.
Right. Right.
But the original
'cause-
issue was whether or not, like, I don't know, you were making machine guns or something, like whatever ATF, jurisdiction is. So people need to understand how egregious this is. This is not like, oh, these guys got together and they're trying to do this task force because they're interested in looking for bad guns. Something like 50% or 57%, I think Gun Owners of America put this out today on Twitter. 57% of the investigations that the ATF is involved in are people who have sold less than 5 guns. That's what they're calling illegal gun dealers. Yeah. And that's how you get wrapped up in stuff like this, because they're justifying a paycheck instead of doing their damn job and looking for, drug dealers or whatever.
Right. And of course, the thing about me is I wasn't even selling guns. It's like and they know I wasn't, because they seized my phone, cloned my phone, never returned it. They seized my computers. They subpoenaed my email records. Right. So they know for a fact that I was not here talking any crazy shit. And 2, I wasn't transferring weapons, hinting at transferring weapons, offering gunsmithing services, hinting at gunsmithing, like nothing.
There's no money involved. This is literally a passion project, a hobbyist thing that Americans have done for hundreds of years.
Correct. And I was trying to develop legit products and systems. We've talked about cyclic energy flow.
Yeah, let's go into that. Blow some people's minds a little bit. Let's talk about it. Because this is why it's worth knowing that when people who come from different backgrounds look at things, they see the problem differently. And the problem is always the same. You have a round, the round goes in the chamber, it goes down the barrel, there's some gas that's exploded, we got to do something with the gas, we got to do something with the harmonics on the metal. So all these things, they look different to different people. To you, what did it look like?
It looked like a circuit, because I've always been a circuits guy. I used to haunt Radio Shack when I was a kid.
I love Radio
and mess
Shack.
around with electronics and what have you. And so it after I started especially after I started building AR rifles, and I started looking at people online who were talking about the problems they'd have, I realized that, you don't just build an AR and expect it to be operable. It has to be tuned. It has to be properly tuned. And understanding the way that you touch off that round, and then the hot gas pushes the barrel out the muzzle, but then some of the gas is redirected in order to kick the bolt back and literally operate the weapon. It was like, there's all that whole dance has to happen correctly, and a lot of things can go wrong. You can get failure to feed, you can get bolt bounce, you can get this, that.
Too much gas, not enough gas.
Too much gas,
yeah,
overgassed, undergassed. How's your round? How's your brass ejecting from the weapon? What's the angle? Where's it going? Thus and so.
And people, and just while you're saying that, people who want to tune those Glock handguns you made, those polymer 80s, because I've done this, you'll set up a camera behind you and you'll watch the angle of the brass, and if it's consistent, it's feeding properly. And if you're having problems and it's all over the place, you go, well, maybe I've got too much spring or not enough spring. Maybe I got a hot enough bullet or not a hot enough load. There's all these games playing, and I'll tell you my first failure that I ever had with an AR, which I bought in a gun show in Kansas.
Yeah.
It wasn't seated. The gas block wasn't seated, so it walked. And at some point, I had a bolt action AR, and I was going like, that's not really what I wanted out of this. I didn't know anything about the gun, though. And if you don't know, you're like, why is this not working? The gremlins aren't doing their job in there. And then you realize, I got to seat the gas block right where it needs to be. The gas block has to be the right size, not too big, not too small, all this kind of stuff.
That's right. Well, it's funny you say that, because I remember, I think it's been a long time, but I think the barrels that I got had a little nub on the opposite side of the journal bearing, so that you could tighten the grub screw, and it was more likely that it wouldn't walk, because there was a little recess to take the screw, so that it would seat properly. Anyway, so yeah, I was like, this is a circuit, right? And the different components in the weapon can be likened to circuit components. So the barrel is actually a wire, because it's a mass flow circuit, right? And as opposed to the circuit that has these lights on, for example, which is you're moving electrons around a path. You're moving mass around a path. And so the barrel, in that sense, is a wire, right? And then you could look at the hole in your the hole leading up to your gas block. That's a resistor. because that's constricting your flow. Your gas tube is another wire, right? The bolt carrier group is a resistor, because in physics, that's what masses do. They resist movement, right? They resist acceleration, the law of inertia. And your buffer weight is also a resistor, and your buffer spring is a capacitor, right? And so I started thinking, well, what if you could apply electrical engineering principles to this thing? And if you could kind of build a universal receiver and fire off a few hundred or a few thousand rounds, different loads and what have you, then if you know a few basics up front, if you know your projectile mass and maybe your powder type and maybe your powder weight, your grain weight of your powder charge, then you should be able to plug in everything else, right? Like the length of your gas system and your dwell time, whatever, and the mass of your, well, you should be able to plug in some numbers and come up with a weapon that's roughly or come up with the masses and weights, right, that would give you a weapon that is roughly in tune. Right. And now I will say, I don't think I invented this. I think that the big manufacturers have done this.
They probably have, right?
It's proprietary. It's internal, right?
It's not
so what
open
I want to
source.
do is to write some software and open source it. So I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is this, like this already exists for ballistics. People can already take an existing rifle with an existing barrel length. You plug in the length of the barrel. You get a chronograph of your average speed. If you know what your speed is, you know what your projectile is. You can find out how far that bolt's going to go if you have the right coefficients of drag and so on.
That's right.
So there are programs on the outside of the gun.
On the outside, correct.
But if you're building your own weapon system and you personally want to tune it because you're a hobbyist, you're looking for bringing that ballistics principles and say, hey, what's the algorithmic sort of thing where I just move a couple of variables around and get this gun into tune? Right. Which is a thing that would be interesting to a hobby gun maker who's out there making one-offs and saying, I want to do this interesting thing. I want to make a monolithic receiver, or I want to make something that has a modular barrel swap. Like, I don't know.
Correct. Right.
All these kind of fun things.
Exactly. So instead of these hobbyists having to be like, oh, I bought this bolt carrier group, but that's too heavy, I got to buy a different one, or I have to mess around with my buffer weights and my springs and their trial and error. I just thought it would be a lot more fun for hobbyists if they could have a piece of software that said, okay, this is my barrel length, this is my whatever, and I'm using this powder, and this is my grain weight, and this is my grain weight of propellant, grain weight of projectile. Okay, you need to use roughly these weights,
for your buffer weights, or you may need to screw around with upping your spring tension. Cool. So simple thing. Right. Wherever the easiest and cheapest way to tinker with it, you might want to play that.
That's exactly right. So I was developing that. And
thank God thank God New York stopped you from that, because God forbid. I mean, right? The thing I love is that you have
horror.
You got a good sense of humor about how stupid all this is.
Horror and moral terror.
Let's zoom back out again for a minute, if you will. Yeah. What's going on with New York and the fear of guns? Why is it like that?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think there's a broad-based fear of guns in the New York population. I mean, I think there's the fear of people of being brutalized or terrorized by wicked people with guns. But I don't think most ordinary kind of working class New Yorkers, and working class New Yorkers definitely outnumber the elites, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think there's some broad fear of guns among them. I think that New York has been, as you say, captured by progressives. And what do we know about progressives? Well, we know that they believe in the perfectibility of human society through administrative means, right? So if that's what you believe in, and that's your program, we're going to perfect human society using the instrument of the administrative state. You can't have people defending themselves. Like, no. What are you talking about?
Right. You need reliance.
For that matter, you can't have like tight-knit families and tight, close-knit communities and all these and these old loyalties and the faith of your fathers and all these traditions. You can't have all that, because we have this program. And you have to get with the program. Do you know what I'm saying? Like we're trying to perfect society here, and you're in the way, so you got to go. And whatever you hold dear, that's got to go. And if you have a constitution that says you have a right to do this because you're a human being, and that right, you have that natural right that adheres to you, and we can't interfere with that. Well, that's got to go.
Self-reliance is not part of their program. They probably
You know,
don't like gardens on the roof either. I'm guessing.
Probably not.
No, we got to regulate that too.
Got to regulate that. Yeah.
Before we got going today, one of the things that I laughed about is that I don't do Saturday night shows in general. So we've got folks that are joining us for the first time on a Saturday night. And I said it's a Saturday night special, which has a kind of a double entendre. It's kind of a double meaning. You want to kind of tell people what that is, and then maybe we'll unpack that a bit because there's some fun about that.
Well, this was back in the 70s. I remember when they talked about Saturday night specials. And of course, in the news, they talk. A Saturday night special is a revolver. It's a low cost revolver, essentially, right? I think it's a relatively shorter intermediate length barrel revolver. And in the 70s, when we started hearing about this, it was in the context of robberies. People are doing all these robberies with these Saturday night specials, and this is a problem. But it turns out, and I think I might have learned this from you, is that it was really about this a wave of kind of affordable personal firearms, that became available, right? That people could buy to defend themselves. And of course, wicked people got their hands on them and used them to attack the decent. But there was nothing, in retrospect, there was nothing particularly wicked about the Saturday night special. It was just that that was what our betters in the media decided we needed to hear about, that kind of weapon. Like, be afraid of these weapons. Yeah.
Well, and the legacy of the Saturday night special, of these inexpensive, usually imported, semi-low quality but functional handguns, was that black people were using them to do crimes. This is where it really came down to it. And this is one of many, many, many instances of race-tinged gun control, which we don't necessarily have to dwell on it too much. But I pushed something out there the other day on Twitter, and I just said, gun control is racist, changed my mind. And everybody goes, well, no. Anybody that knows the history of gun control and weapons control in general knows that it goes back pre-U.S. Constitution. There are parts and codes that existed all the way back into the 1600s on this continent that were trying to restrict black people from having knives. That's the earliest one that I'm aware of, was in New Orleans. And it was about blades, because that's what people carried. Right. And it was about, how do we make sure that we handle this problem? And then some of our major gun control issues, and particularly the Gun Control Act of 1968, was specifically right after race riots that started happening. And they went, well, we're going to use this fear that we've got right there, this moment, and we're going to get some control. And I don't think it has to do with whether they were scared of black people or even racism, but they certainly drummed it up, and they used that as kind of the specter of it. And Saturday night specials were primarily what were outlawed during that time. And the story is that if you listen to people that are pro-gun like me, it's like, well, that's what people who don't have a lot of money would get to defend their home. Because if you don't have a lot of money, but you got $50 and you can buy yourself a $50 revolver, you show me anybody that wants to run through the door when there's a $50 revolver on the other side of it, I'm going to show you a liar. It's like people say, what's the best caliber? It's like whatever caliber you have that you can point at
whatever
somebody.
You're carrying. When the trouble jumps off, right?
I knew a guy that would run around with a 22 Derringer. It's like, you want to screw with that guy? He's got a 22 Derringer. He'll shoot you, and it'll still suck. Nobody wants that.
Exactly.
So it's very interesting.
Stopping knockdown power is a myth. It's like, don't get shot with a 22.
Just don't get shot. Most people are not going to try to take that risk. If it looks like you're serious about pulling a trigger, then that's the whole story about the sound of the 12 gauge shotgun. It's not that people think they're going to get hit with a shotgun; it's that they don't get hit with anything, and they can hear the shotgun. It's just loud.
Correct. Right.
In any case, but the just the kind of the amusing, like you said, don't get mystical on me, is what you sent me this text. But the idea that we're doing this Saturday night special, we're talking about this. There is this weird fear, and I always wondered whether it was race based, whether it's just because people are in close proximity in New York. Is that some of it, or if it really is that progressive small number of people steering the ship and just running off liberty?
I think it's the small number of people steering the ship. I really do. And I should add that there are right-wing progressives as well.
Let's talk about
it. That's part of the problem, right? It's like I don't know if you're familiar with Sonny Johnson. You might be. I think you were in one or two of her spaces, maybe. But Sonny Johnson is a black conservative, and she's one of the real ones. I always say that I probably don't have a bigger profile because I don't talk like Larry Elder or Candace Owens or Jason Whitlock, right?
What is their style that caught on to people, do you think? Looking from the outside and diagnosing that.
Talking shit about black people. That's their style.
That's their style. Okay. I did tell Larry Elder when I saw him at Freedom Fest in Memphis that I didn't think it was a good idea to hang out with him. I didn't want him around me because having recently been thrown out of the FBI, I thought being seen with the blackface of white supremacy was not a good look for me. And he did laugh about it. He's got a good sense of humor. So, but also they're like, everybody was there kind of kissing his ass, and because he's kind of a big name in the area.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, I don't know. He's just a dude who's got two different color shoes on. I don't know if that's a thing that he does. It was amusing to me. I just wanted to see if I could catch him off guard. He laughed. To his credit, he laughed about that. So
yeah, I mean, look, one of the problems with look, if you've been in my spaces or heard my content, you know that what I'm always saying is that, and I've been saying this for a long time, is that Black Americans are actually staunchly conservative. That's just a fact. I was telling people this, I'm getting into arguments about it back when I was still on the left. I was saying this because people were trying to come up with all these reasons why. Well, it's like, why aren't there more Black Republicans? And I'm like, well, your attitude is one of sneer and contempt. That's why. Like, it's not attractive. What do you mean? You want to come at me and you want your pitch to be a noun, a verb, and plantation. Well, I'm sorry. That's not that's a terrible pitch. That's a terrible pitch.
That's selling a negative. That's not selling an opportunity.
It's not just that. I mean, selling a negative, you could sell, like, I'm a problem solver. So you could actually sell me a negative and I'll be like, oh, a problem? Sure, let's solve it. But the problem is, like, I'm very suspicious of when people seem to be trying to get me to switch off my critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start every conversation by trying to shock me with this specter of chattel slavery, like right away, my bullshit detector goes into overdrive. I'm like, why are you trying to shock me with this word? In other words, make your point and move on. You know what I'm saying? So it's like this, plantation.
Like that could be a starting point, but that shouldn't be the ending point. That shouldn't be the mic drop.
It shouldn't even be a starting point because the fact is,
there's some simple minds out there.
Look. It's like, make your case, make a conservative case. That's it.
Okay.
And as far as I'm concerned, in New York City, for example, there are plenty of people, plenty of Black people specifically, who are property owners, who own brownstones, who own whatever, who have businesses,
Sure.
right? And they're ready to hear a message about smaller government. The problem is that a lot of conservatives, when they bother to come talk to us, they never talk about that. They want to talk about crime and welfare. Well, listen, we know about crime, and most of us actually have serious problems with the welfare system. I remember my parents and all their friends, when I'd hear them talking politics when I was a kid, they'd be complaining about the welfare system. They'd be complaining about the fact that, well, hang on a second, how come I got to, drag my ass out of the house every morning? I got to walk past people who are waiting to get a check, and they're having all these babies that they can't afford to raise themselves. So we have to raise them. What's up with that? Okay.
Yeah.
But there's a segment of conservative America that doesn't understand that. They somehow, they're just unwilling to give their fellow citizens the grace of assuming that they're human beings capable of reason. And
Bingo.
so, and that's the problem. So, that's one problem.
Well,
the other problem is
what you just
weird.
said there is that they fundamentally are looking and saying that urban people living in urban areas that are Black are not like me. That's what that's the thought.
Exactly.
They're like, well, they're
Correct.
different than me. It's like, why?
Correct. Well,
That's never been my
And look,
experience, but it's weird.
You could say they're different people, but I mean, they have the same kind of interests. It's like if you own property,
Yep.
you're trying to protect what you have from the overreaching state. You want a good life for your children, what have you. So progressives have captured New York. Conservatives have decided that New York and cities like it are not worth saving.
Yes.
Because very many conservatives, I'm sorry to say, don't know how to do math. They are numerically illiterate. They can't look at an election turnout graph and do basic calculations.
Well, I think you're assuming that they're looking at that. I think you're assuming they look at that graph. Guys like me who look and go, I can't ever live in the state of New York ever, because all the things I got a closet full of felonies over there. I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
right.
right.
And you know, I basically move based on where I can keep the things that I already own.
Well, sure.
But
I'm not.
But I've never looked at I've never looked at an election graph and thought, wouldn't it be worth trying to flip that sucker, because there's only a small fraction of people that are showing up for each election, and I've never done that. I've never done it. It's never even occurred to me, and that's why I've enjoyed talking to you, because some of the things you've said is, why do you consider it ceded territory? And I was like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like we can win because they keep losing. But
right,
and maybe
it's like,
change.
That's exactly right. It's like, look, if you look at the turnout graph, and you know. In very many quote unquote blue cities, right, what you find is that the turnout is very low among Black people, let's say. I mean, I did this for Boston and a couple other cities, and it was like these turnout numbers were like less than 50% in many cases. So you have like the majority of Black voters who are eligible to vote not voting, right? And then you say, well, Democrats have a stranglehold. What stranglehold? In other words, 90% of the 30% of Black voters who do vote, let's say the 40% who do, 90% of those vote for Democrats.
Yep.
But you have a whole 50, 60% who are just sitting at home. Is anyone talking to them? If not, why not? What's the matter with you? Right?
Yeah.
And so this idea that, well, we're just not going to go for it's not worth it to us. Really, it's not worth it. Okay, fine. You know?
And that's crazy, because states like California, which is solidly blue because of the urban areas, that's why the cities vote blue. A lot of them are like really bad idea people in your business who vote for things and vote away their own rights as best they can, which is weird, on some misplaced sort of social compassion maybe. But but there are more Republicans, and I'm not a Republican. I know you're not a Republican, but there's more Republicans in California than in any other state. There's just also more Democrats, it turns out. So they lose.
Well, correct. And also in San Francisco, I'd be willing to bet that the working class people in San Fran outnumber the Silicon Valley kids.
They got to, right?
So they got to. So again, the question is, why can't you talk to these people? And you know, it's this weird kind of diabolic pride. Like, no, like my approach is perfect. And if my approach isn't working, the problem is with someone else. Well, I mean, I like that. I also kind of viscerally reject that, right? In my career, you know, one of the things I've learned, by the way, I've learned this partly, you know, sidebar, like thinking about military people and how like military people do things, and their attitude toward information, and their attitude toward responsibility, and their kind of proprietary attitude to things they're responsible for. That was a big influence on my career. Like, I decided to look at these people and say, how can I use what they do and their kind of way of looking at the world to become a better software engineer? And so one thing was, you know, you take responsibility. Like this is my problem. This is my problem. Right. But what do I see from so-called conservatives? The problem is with somebody else. It's not my problem. It's like my bad outreach. No, that's someone else's problem. No, they're brainwashed over there. That's the problem. They're not capable of reason, because my way of reasoning is so, you know, recondite that they can't possibly. It's like, no, like your outreach sucks. Dude, it's terrible. And I mean, it's manifestly terrible. Look, didn't a bunch of conservatives, so-called PayPal conservatives, didn't a bunch of them get up on their hind legs when Trump got a mugshot, when he went to Georgia to get his mugshot taken? And they were like, oh, he's got a mugshot. Black people are going to love him now. It's like, what are you talking about, stupid? No less a person than Dinesh D'Souza said, literally said in writing, Trump is the gangster for Black America. First of all, stupid, we hate gangsters. You understand what I'm saying? It's like, we're family people. Like, we don't like gangsters and gangbangers and drive-by shooters. Like, we hate those people because they're a threat to us and to our families. Dumbass. What's the matter with you?
That makes perfect sense. Here's the thing that I've been trying to, it occurred back to me when I talk to people that are young. Because I got into this discussion with a couple of young people, and I brought it up the other day, and I actually did a whole show on this. And the show was entitled "Conservatives, What Are You Conserving?" We did a big space on it, And all I want to do is I want to ask people that simple question. And it goes to the heart of what you're talking about. Also, anybody who's ever been an instructor, and I know that when you're a coder, you're always learning, but you're also always teaching because that's what debugging is about. You got to go through and you're teaching yourself and other people are teaching you what you, okay.
Yes, sir.
If you are not properly delivering information to someone, there are two parts to every equation, right? There's the transmission and there's the reception, TX and RX. That happens in radio. It happens in a lot of network traffic. If we are not getting information across, the failure is in one of the two. It might be that the receiver is not doing the job, but it may be that you are not transmitting a receivable information. And so I constantly have 6 different metaphors, 6 different imagery, 6 different ways that we can talk about something. When I talk about guns, it's like, okay, let's talk about this. Okay, think about a throttle. Oh, you don't like a throttle? Like, let's think about this. Let's think about this different thing. We got to look at a gradual weight. I will give you different images because if it doesn't resonate with you, if you've never driven a 5-speed and you don't know how to use a clutch, that's not going to be useful to you. So I will move on from that and I will give you. So the question was, what are you conserving? And what I was not shocked to learn, but maybe I raised surprise, like a little like, ooh. I had a young gal. I said, what are you conserving? She's part of a young conservatives organization, a young GOP group. And she said, well, you know, like the Constitution stuff and the 2A. And I said, you're going to tell me hashtags? Is that what you're going to, that's what you're conserving, are hashtags? It's like, hun, I'm not trying to be mean to you. What I'm trying to have you do is do critical thinking. Yes, it's so important to me that you actually know the things that you are trying to conserve. And once you do, then you know how to connect with other people that want to conserve those.
Right.
And you know how to communicate why those things are worth conserving.
That's right.
And also why we've lost most of those things and we got to probably actually not conserve them, but go get them because we got to be progressive about getting those things back at this point.
Well, I mean, look, thinking about it's funny because when I hear my MAGA brethren speak, like I'm not MAGA, but I have a lot of MAGA people in my circle. And when I hear them speak, they talk about rhinos, Republicans in name only, and so on and so forth. And it's like all these people up on the hill, and there's a swamp up on Capitol Hill. Well, here's what's interesting, right? How come all these Republicans have been in office for so long?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, if I'm supposed to be on a plantation, right, and I'm supposed to be some benighted savage who just doesn't understand his own best interests, right? Then it's like, well, okay, you tell me
that
why.
Might be the quote of the night.
Bro, listen to me. Listen to me. Mitch McConnell is so old, right? Dirt gives him mad respect. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
I call it the geriocracy. People are like, they're like, well, what about Chuck Grassley? He's great. I'm like, Chuck Grassley is 1,000. Like, I want Chuck Grassley out 25 years ago.
Years ago, right?
I want Mitch McConnell gone. I think if you're over the age of like 65, like if you're too old to do regular jobs, if you would have normally left because you're not there, why on earth are you trying to die on the floor of the Senate?
But look,
I agree with you on this.
But let's take that off the table a second. Okay. Forget about age limits. It's just like they're not delivering. You're complaining about them. You're complaining about the terrible things they keep voting for and they keep, right? So then why have they been there for this long? Don't tell me that's because of the magical brainwashing machine that the Democratic Party has, because that's in your house. You see, so
have you ever seen those surveys? You talked about numbers earlier. I want to ask you this: have you ever seen the surveys, the popularity or the what do they call it? The approval rating of Congress? Have you ever
Congress,
seen?
Yeah.
It's like toilet bowl low, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit higher than syphilis,
right? Essentially,
yeah.
Like moderately higher, but like
right,
slightly less than chocolate covered dog shit.
It depends on who's hot this weekend. It's like syphilis.
Syphilis is trending. It's looking good. No, like chocolate covered dog shit. Then there's Congress. Then there's syphilis. I think that's the 3 levels.
Nasty.
Okay. So people are like, well, there's chocolate in it. It may be dog shit. Okay, that's where. God. Okay, so that's Congress. But here's the thing: people's individual congressperson, always rate quite high. And this has been a game going on since I was a kid. I remember hearing about it even when I was in high school. They said the reason why is every single congressperson comes home and says this: Congress is a bunch of crooks. They're a bunch of evildoers. Look what they're doing to this country. You got to send me back there to fight them. I've been fighting them for 50 years. Keep sending me back. I'm doing a great job of not fighting them. And everybody just goes like, oh, well, he said he's fighting them, so pull the lever. There's that. Right. There's some of that, right?
Right.
It's just failure to look and see. We love politicians, but we don't equate them with results.
Right.
I love
And
zero
here-
politicians. I only care about outcomes.
Right. And here's the thing. I wouldn't be so salty about that in particular, except that the same people who keep sending the Chuck Grassley's and the Mitch McConnells back to do the same terrible job, right, want to look at me and say, like, well, you people keep voting for people who are doing you no good.
Yeah, Nancy
I'm like,
Pelosi's
well,
your fault then. Chuck
right,
Schumer's
it's
your
like-
fault.
Right, exactly. And it's like, but well, again, so Mitch McConnell's your fault then. And that aside, the other thing again is that people look. Let me back up a second. Some backstory. When I left the left, right, I didn't jump to the right. I didn't go to the Republicans because, again, I thought that, well, how can I put this? Like, I'm a black dude. I don't worship my own skin because that's idolatry, but I love my people, right? And I love my tribe. And I just didn't like that, again, that whole sneering contempt that I seem to hear from Republicans all the time. So I started my own thing called Foundationism. And I have a manifesto. I wrote the Foundationist Manifesto. And the first point in the Foundationist Manifesto is see deeply. The second point in the manifesto is listen closely. The third is reason honestly. So, I think, and I wrote that manifesto and I designed this system because I wanted us to, I didn't think that we were going to solve all our problems if we just got rid of the lefties. I thought that a good first step to solving our problems was enabling us to have higher quality arguments about the things that are wrong with our republic, with our systems. Yeah. So it's like everyone, I remember I was inspired by this, by many things, but there was an interview that I think Norman Mailer did, where he said that the world would be a better place if the cops were the best cops that they could be and the robbers were the best robbers they could be.
Oh.
Yeah, he said that the world would be better if the robbers were like awesome and the cops were awesome. You know what I'm saying?
That sounds like my kind of
cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Right? So
that's like a real contrarian kind of thing because people will go like, why do you want the robbers to be good? Because I want everyone to be really good at what they're good at, even if it's being bad.
Even if it's being bad, exactly.
Because that makes the good people have to be better.
Well, if a person knows that he's like a second story man, he's like, no, I'm not going to shoot anybody. I don't shoot people. I'm not some killer. I'm a second story man. I creep. That's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying? He's not a half-ass.
Okay, I got to pause.
The half-ass is that.
I got to tell you the story now.
Yeah, you got
I'm at the FBI Academy.
Okay.
And we got this girl. We got a lot of girls there that I'm not sure they've ever been outside, like outside of a building. I think they've just lived indoors. Like a lot of indoor dogs. And I'm not mad at them because they're real sweet people. You know what I mean? Like there's people that are too nice to be mad at them. But you're looking at them going like, how are you in the same job that I'm at? So we've got this legal instructor. And his name was Mike. Was that his name? His name was Bulzomi. That was his name. The Bull Bulzomi. And he was really loud and he was really excited and he would yell things. And so he would walk around and he would ask these questions and he would just get real like amped up. And he goes, Teresa. I'm using real names here, by the way, because that's how I roll. He goes, Teresa. He goes, we're going to break into this house because we're cat burglars and we've got a pillowcase. What's the pillowcase for? And she goes, the cats.
What?
And
Jesus Christ.
He stops in his tracks. He stops in his tracks. And he's never heard anything like this before. And he goes, what? And she goes, the pillowcase is for the cats that we're going to steal.
What?
And he said, I'm going to step outside for a minute. Wow. Somebody help your classmate out here and explain what a cat burglar is. And it was like, these are the people, like she has a badge and a gun still. She's a real sweetheart. Like I'm fond of her as a human being. I'm terrified that, like you said, a second story man, I heard you explain it. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I get it. Yeah, this is someone who's on. He's using sophistication. He's not using overt violence. That would have confused my dear friend who is an FBI agent. I just thought you had to know that's the caliber that we're up against.
I'm not surprised in the least.
You should be scared.
I'm beyond fear at this point.
Yeah,
I'm just
that's fair.
I'm just grimly resolute. But I mean, yeah, I thought that's what we needed, was to have better quality arguments, about what was wrong. It's like, no, we're not going to get rid of the lefties. Just like, let's have decent arguments about stuff. Okay. What I see is that these arguments are poisoned by like a handful of very specific sins, and one of them is pridefulness, right? Diabolic pride. You can have symbolic pride. Symbolic pride is fine. Symbolic means.
Can you define those two for me,
sure.
for me and everybody?
Pride is, symbolic pride is that which unites. Diabolic pride is that which divides.
Okay.
So symbolic pride is fine. You're a military guy. You're proud of your regiment. No problem. You're proud to be part of your family. You're proud of your family. You're proud of your kids. No problem. But the pridefulness that says, well, I'm better than if other people think I'm obnoxious, it's their problem. It's their fault. I'm not obnoxious. They're just too sensitive, or, I'm like, you just don't understand the way I do things. And that's diabolic pride. And the scriptures make a very big deal about diabolic pride for a reason, because it's a self-reinforcing sin, you see. Right. Like the sin of wrath, like you get angry. Well, your anger will cool eventually. Right. Same thing with lust. You're lustful, but your lust will ebb and flow, whatever. Right. But pridefulness, like, you will just spiral right down, because pride interrupts the feedback loop. Chesterton said that vanity is better than pride. Vanity is better because at least vanity is social. Right. Like, you want to cut a good figure in front of other people. So you're acknowledging the fact that other people's opinions matter. But if you're prideful, that's not the thing.
You're worshiping of yourself.
Pardon me?
You're worshiping yourself. Your pride feeds itself because you are the audience.
Correct.
And you are
That's
also
exactly right.
you are also the one receiving it, and you are the one who is giving it. And so that's it's like government. It's the self-licking ice cream cone.
Correct.
Yeah,
and
horrible.
So,
okay.
So, right. And so diabolic pride is what caused, like, the angel of light to become Diablo, right? To become the devil. It's like, no, I'm cut off from that feedback loop. I'm cut off from the source, right? And I look, we see this among lefties, yes, but being a conservative, I'm concerned with what we see, what's in our house, and I don't like to see that in our house, And again, I see that when people say, well, we don't have to worry about outreach because our outreach is perfect. The problem is those people over there. I'm like, well, that's pridefulness. Stop that. And when people, consume internet crime porn, and they're obsessively looking at these 45-second video clips of some, young black people, for example, in the streets doing stupid stuff. You know what I'm saying? They're consuming that, and they're like wallowing in this resentment, and they're working themselves up into this frenzy. And it's a pornographic frenzy. And look, pornography is a problem, not just sex pornography, but all kinds of pornography, because a pornographic view of the world destroys your ability to deal with real things and real people, right?
It's amygdala porn.
Pardon me?
It's amygdala porn.
It's amygdala porn. And just like, if a young man who is addicted to sex-based pornography, find that he doesn't know how to talk to a real woman. Because a real woman is active. Real girlfriend, a real wife is active.
Yeah, she's not paid to be some sort of, flop job there.
She's gonna listen. A real girlfriend is gonna challenge you. She's gonna say, "Get a job. Stop sleeping on the couch. Get your shit together." Right? she's gonna say, "Listen, I need you to take out the garbage, or open this pickle jar, or kill this spider." She's gonna look at you and say, "Don't bullshit me." Okay. The chick on the screen with her tits out will do none of those things. Okay, now, if you transfer the thing to crime porn, well, yeah, if that's your interface to quote unquote Black America, if all you're looking at is clips of crime porn and degenerate celebrities from the music industry or from wherever, then when it comes time to talk to someone like me, you don't know what to say. You don't know how to act, and I've seen that time and time again. It's like, what's the matter with you? Like, You can't just have a conversation.
Yeah, that's just a dude over there. He's got a beard like me. You got a daughter. We got an awful lot of things in common. I learned how to do C++. I'm terrible at it, but I understand that it works.
Right?
Yeah.
I've been really concerned with this. This is the fundamental problem in captured places like New York. It's not that the Democratic Party has these superpowers where they can just brainwash people, and it's that the people who are supposed to be fighting against these things are not fighting against them. The people who are supposed to be conserving our constitutional rights are not conserving them. And again, that goes for, again, I said there's such a thing as a right-wing progressive, because there is. When a lot of these conservative politicians bother to come to the cities, they seem to leave their conservative politics or their conservative beliefs, such as they are, behind them when they cross the city line. And by the time they get to me, they're talking like statists.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, what happened to limited government? What happened? You were talking about limited government when you were talking to that to my white brother in the suburbs or in the farmland. That sounded good to me. I was like, hey, right on. And then by the time you get to me, you're like, yeah, we need more police and more laws and more this. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
What happened?
Same answer. Better culture, better people doing the right things, like expanding our values. That makes more sense still. So,
getting
getting
the government's boot off our necks
so
we can figure things out. Right.
Full agreement there. Let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Is this New York specific, or do you get that feedback to Chicago, Los Angeles? Because New York is its own animal. I mean, it's
all our cities. Our cities. This is the problem. I mean, again, just think for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, some background. I am the son of working class immigrants from the Caribbean, right? And at a certain point, I started really identifying very strongly with my working class background. Like, my path to conservative was probably not the same as, definitely not the same as, other more prominent Black conservatives, because again, I didn't look at the Republican Party as a model for anything. I didn't look at Ronald Reagan as a model I can't stand Ronald Reagan. Rudolph Giuliani neither. I started looking at my background and like the people I grew up around. And then I realized, wait a second, I grew up in conservatism. Like the stuff these guys talk about, when they bother to talk righteously, it's like, wait a minute, I grew up with that. And everyone I knew, they grew up with parents who were fanatical about education, who didn't want to hear any excuses, right? Who wanted excellence, who insisted on discipline and respect, who were people of faith, right? Who believed in Black self-reliance, right? Who believed that you shouldn't be asking the government for stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? But when I was a kid, I didn't know that was conservatism. It was just life. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
I grew up going to Sunday. I went to Sunday school at St. Ormond's Congregational Church over on Merrick Boulevard. I remember around graduation time, the elders in the church, strangers, people I didn't know, would come up to me and say, hey, you're doing us proud, young man. Keep on hitting those books. Keep on, I like strange old people, strangers were proud of me.
That's a good feeling.
It's a good feeling. But what I'm saying is that's conservatism.
Right. Community,
again,
values, the future.
And I'm telling you that as far as working Black folks are concerned, most of us grew up like that.
I think most people maybe
yes,
right.
Well, yes.
Isn't that just that's not even a Black value? I don't think.
I agree.
I think it's American.
I agree, but I'm just talking about the retardedness of the GOP and their inability to talk to Black folks. That's what I'm talking. I mean, I agree with you.
Well, it goes right back to that first thing that I think you at least are illuminating to me is that people are looking. It still comes down to that person is different than me for some reason. I didn't grow. I grew up luckily enough in California and then in Texas, in places where I didn't know that was supposed to be the case. I didn't know I was supposed to look at people who had different colored skin or came from different backgrounds that were like, I was like, oh, like they're Filipino. They just have cool food. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's got a lot of sugar in it and I'm into it. Like, that's what I knew growing up. We had a lot of Filipino, we had a lot of Vietnamese. I had some friends that were black that were in my little, schools. I went to Catholic schools and you just meet people. It's like, well, we all have the same values and we're all Catholic and we're all going to the same school. We all they're willing to pay for education.
That's right.
So that's something. So we pretty much had a lot in common, other than some of us had more, family members and less, and some of us had different food at lunch, which I try to trade for or whatever, like
exactly trade. Yeah.
But at some point, the people that are running this country, many of whom are very old, grew up with some really old ideas that I didn't learn. They didn't learn what I learned in the 80s and 90s. They didn't grow up learning the things that you learned. And with that awareness going like, hey, these are just American values. They're still living segregated values. And they're approaching it differently.
I think that's part of it. But I think you could look at it also in the opposite way, is that part of the problem is that we are besieged by people with brand new ideas.
What are these new ideas?
Well, the idea that a man can become a woman without just by saying words.
Wait a minute, are we getting bigoted right now? Okay, let's do this. I'm into it.
Yes, and you're welcome.
Yeah. How weird a planet are we living where guys are doing that, right?
Right.
How weird a planet are we where Planet Fitness is going to side with a dude with a semi-erect penis in the women's locker room and kick women out? I mean. Yeah, okay, that's a new idea. That's definitely new. I'll give you that 100%.
Right. So any new ideas are and they're part of the problem. Mm-hmm. Part of the problem is that you could say new ideas, very very new ideas, very old sins. Again, pridefulness, right? Resentment. I mean, the story of one brother striking down another out of resentment is the second oldest story in the Bible, right? So these are very old sins. The problem really is that we have just recently dismantled or started to dismantle all the structures we had in place to prevent those sins from having the run of the place. Right? And that's one problem. The other problem is the people, so-called conservatives, who were supposed to be tending the garden, were derelict in their duty. And now they don't want to admit it. They want to say, well, it's those lefties. Well, hang on a second. How come there was a long march through the institutions? How come it wasn't a running battle?
Right.
How come
they just surrendered left and right?
How come they just marched on through who was fighting them? Who was supposed to be fighting them?
Mm-hmm.
Look, all the things that are happening to our country, right? To our civilization. We feel like we're besieged from all sides. No, there are bad people and bad ideas rushing to fill a vacuum. Why is there a vacuum there? What was there before the vacuum?
What was there?
Why was it done away with? Why did we allow it to be done away? Who allowed it to be done away with? Questions, right? And people have to start taking responsibility. It's not just, it's not good enough for so-called conservatives to look at me and assume that I don't take responsibility for you people just need to, you people need to take responsibility for the fact that you failed to safeguard the things that needed to be safeguarded. And you failed to make the case for yourself, and you failed in your what should have been a primary act of moral imagination in saying that, something, these are my people. I'm American, these are my people. These cities are American cities. Our great cities, Chicago, Cincinnati, for God's sake, named after a Roman senator, New York, Los Angeles, San Fran, these are American cities. Who decided that they should be abandoned to progressives?
Right.
I mean, of course, the progressives wanted to take them over. They want to take everything over.
Right. That's what they do.
Right. I mean, that's what they do. Okay. So who was supposed to oppose them? And why didn't they?
Right. No, these are.
Can we get an after action report? Can someone say what happened? Can we? You know what I'm saying? So,
I agree with you, and I keep saying the same thing, and this marries up with your point really nicely.
Yes, sir.
In 1946, they passed the Administrative Procedures Act, And
EPA.
what you're hearing about from people on the right is like, oh, there's this deep state, and I call it the administrative state. It's much more accurate. The administrative state just knows one thing. One, we're the ones in charge. Two, we were given that power in 1946, and we've been slowly growing it through the executive branch.
That's
and three, we outlast every president, and we don't give a shit who you elect. It doesn't matter to us because we're going to be here when they're gone. So our work is more important, and it continues onward, which is why these institutions end up captured. Now, the scary thing is that they're captured by people on the left. And I don't hate the left either. I think you and I share this. I just did a long sort of meditation on balance. There's a big need for balance. Progressive ideas are not my enemy. They are the challenge to make me have better ideas. As you said about robbers and cops, better cops, better robbers. Smarter leftists, smarter people on the right equals everybody comes to a better version of whatever it is they believe. They hone those arguments, iron sharpening iron. But otherwise, we just get dummies that just roll over and are trying to sell us, sneakers, whatever the heck the deal was, which is when you told me that, it makes I don't understand sneaker culture to begin with. I don't understand. I actually ran a case on a guy. This is brilliant. You want to talk about brilliance. This guy had worked out a money laundering operation in a very, very expensive shopping mall, like down by the water in DC. Okay.
Yeah.
In the National Harbor. And what he did was he was a consignment dealer of super high-end sneakers. Wow. Hundreds or thousands of dollars. Okay.
Wow.
And so what would happen is that he would have inventory that'd be on the shelf. It'd be like a size 10 Yeezys or whatever the heck those things are. I think I'm saying it right because I don't even know. I don't know enough about sneakers. Whatever. There's expensive ass sneakers on the wall. People would come in and then they would order or buy. They would give money in. They would get something out, and they were getting drugs because he was selling drugs out of there, or he was moving. Wow. He was laundering the money through a product he never had to have leave. So people came in and bought sneakers they never took home. So he had inventory on the wall. You just couldn't buy any of it because it wasn't your size. And so he was doing this, and it was brilliant. But it was like, okay, I don't even know how we're going to get. He was flying around in like private jets and going to the Dominican Republic with, suitcases full of cash. He was smart. He was a smart dude. He was abusing the sneaker culture. I just thought that was really funny because I was like, I don't understand any of what they're talking about. Like, wait a minute, there's multi-$1,000 sneakers, and people are like, oh yeah, that's a thing. And I was like, to who? If that's the thing that's going to get Trump in front of black people, I was like, I just don't think that's going to be the winner. I just don't.
Well, yeah, I was.
What a low threshold to aim at that one. That's just silliness.
Don't call it low. Call it retarded.
Retarded. It is retarded.
It's a retarded threshold.
It is.
And again, these people exactly. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with you? So this is why, when you hear me talk about people like Sonny Johnson, I was so happy to meet Sonny Johnson and to get into her spaces and to start talking to people in her circle, because here was someone who actually understood. She got it. Like she gets it. She understands that conservatism is deep in our bones as black folks, because we've had to be conservative. Think about it. Chattel slavery is antithetical to the concept of the close-knit family.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to regenerate our traditions and figure a way to kind of preserve what was absolutely necessary through that hardship. And then after emancipation, we had to figure out how to start, generating value and being a real part of the economy, instead of just being a fungible pool of fiat labor, And so she describes herself, and I'm with her on this, as a Frederick Douglass / Booker T. Washington conservative, and there's a lot to that. And I think right now, what I'm seeing in the political landscape in the United States is I see a lot of these PayPal conservatives ruining it for the real conservatives.
What's a PayPal conservative? How do you define that?
Well, I mean, it's like, people whose job it is to generate eyeballs and clicks and raise money, but who don't actually conserve anything. Mm-hmm. So Charlie Kirk is one example.
Okay.
Right. PayPal conservative,
Trademark. You got to trademark that. That's yours.
I can't. PayPal. I can't trademark PayPal. But
PP conservative. It's even better.
You're gonna get me in trouble. You can get me in trouble. But no. It's these fakes ruining it for the real ones. and and ruining the name of conservatism, such that in many Black communities, it's like people will look at you askance if you say you're a conservative. You have to explain yourself. And again, I don't blame them. I blame conservatism, because brand management is a thing.
Yep. And when you're saying is like once you explain it, they're like, oh, I'm all those things.
That's exactly what.
And they're like, oh, why do you call it conservative? It's like, because that's what it's called.
Because that's what it is. Look, a funny story. My mom, my parents, when I went public on social media about my case, they started kind of taking my links and sending them to their friends and family and so on and so forth. And some people would come back and say, they'd see some talk I did, and they say, well, what does he mean he's a conservative? Ugh. Because they thought that meant that I had become one of these Black people whose favorite indoor sport is shit talking Black people, is insulting Black people. And my mom had to be like, no. He means conservative like us, like in the old ways. Like they're like, oh, okay. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it shouldn't be that. But that's the same question: is what are you conserving? If you don't know the answer to it, then maybe you are the PayPal conservative, if that's the name. But the question is this: this is the one I want to challenge you with, because I think it's, whenever I look at something that seems devious or seems nefarious, I will always err on the side of giving stupidity and retardation.
Yes, that's right.
I will give it credit where due. Right? It's almost it's just as often as it's ignorance to malfeasance.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
And how many people just have no idea what the hell they're talking about? They said, Dexter, Constitution 2A, families, values, religions, or whatever. 1A. They don't know the thing that they actually think they believe. They just looked at the model of people that they're like, okay, these people have got it squared away. I like the way that they're living their life, but I never asked them what it is that they live by. I'm just going to try to say the things that they say without understanding it. Is it possible that some of these folks just don't get it? They haven't internalized the thing that when you just said in the old way, the ways that I feel about it, then they would immediately know. Because once I lead like this poor gal that I talked to, when I let her down, I said, what are you conserving? She goes, I said, are you interested in family values? She goes, yeah. I said, where do you get your values? She was like, from my faith. Okay, good. What faith is that? I'm Christian. So you have Christian values. Got it. What are the things that lead you to? Well, it leads me to believe that people are, innately of value. Okay, good. So now we have the individual self-worth. We're going to move down the chain. We have to walk them to this, though. The TX and the RX has to happen. Is it possible they just don't know? They just don't, there's a lot of ignorance, too.
Now, when you say they, who are you referring to?
I'm talking about conservatives that are failing to give messaging to anybody. Conservatives are failing to give messaging to young people.
I see what you mean.
They're failing all over the place because it's just they're on defense and they're not really great at it. They're not good at the offense. Yeah.
Okay. So you asked a question. The answer is no. I don't think that's what the problem is.
Okay. Why not?
Yeah, I think the problem is, again, these very old sins. I think the problem is a form of self-worship, satanic pride, and resentment. And avarice. I mean, it's like that. It's very lucrative. It can be very lucrative to be a PayPal conservative. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, just think. If you're Charlie Kirk, get on the circuit. Yeah, you're getting paid. Or if you're a Squeaky Shapiro,
What's a Squeaky Shapiro?
That's profitable. Yeah, Squeaky.
Wait, hold on.
Squeaky getting paid.
What's squeaky about Shapiro?
What's squeaky? His fucking voice. What do you mean what's squeaky about Shapiro?
I just wanted to make sure you were saying what I thought you said. That's fine. What you can't do though to Ben Shapiro is you can't put him at 1.5x because it's like helium at
1.5 what? Oh yeah,
speed.
Like up the speed.
Yeah, most people can't process that fast. I actually can hear that fast, but I don't want to.
No, well, the pitch. I mean, yeah, if you start to pitch up, you'd start to get into the ultrasonics. But
somebody told me they listen to my show and they do it in 75% speed because I speak really quickly.
Yeah.
And then they turned on Dan Bongino and they thought he was on drugs because it still sounds kind of like Dan, but it sounds like Dan like he's taking benzos. So
that's hilarious. That's hilarious.
I aspire not to be squeaky. That's all I'm saying. Okay, fair enough.
Don't be squeaky. No. Don't be squeaky. But yeah, no, I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is that there's just arisen this great kind of mechanism for raising money. And we've seen this. Look, I mean, didn't the GOP just get rid of Ronna McDaniel because she was running the whole thing like her own private fiefdom, and she was funneling money to all these weird places? Like, hey, why aren't you? Hang on a second. Why are you sending money to people who are defending safe seats? And like Lee Zeldin is getting starved out running for governor in New York State. What's the matter with you?
Man, I thought Lee Zeldin was going to pull it out too, but I also knew he wasn't.
I think that I don't think that election was fair.
Yeah.
I think there was some chicanery going on. I just can't see that, like, Kathy Hochul, who has like Kathy Hochul has negative charisma.
Who is her constituency?
She causes other people around her to be less charismatic. And she's a leftover from a disgraced administration. I don't see how she beat Lee Zeldin fair and square. I don't get that.
I tend to agree.
But then again, right? Speaking of election chicanery, again, PayPal conservatives, right, will come up and say, well, you see something bad jumps off in a city, and they say, oh, well, you get what you voted for. And I'm looking at these people like, hang on a second, you were just talking about 2020. You were just complaining about election theft in 2020. You think that's the only place election theft has happened? You think Democrats in Chicago run clean elections? Stupid. What's the matter with you?
But here's the thing. You challenged me by saying that. I was listening to you before.
Yeah.
And then I went, oh, yeah. It's really important that we get unified in the things that we actually believe. If you believe something, then you should probably believe it across the spectrum. I kind of pride myself on that. But I got lazy at thinking about New York. I'm like, yeah, New York, they don't care about freedom. They hate freedom.
Right.
That's what they're...
See deeply. You got to see deeply.
I just ignored it. I just went like, well, I don't live in New York. It's not my problem, but it seems like they love that. And I also have a lot of feelings for people who live upstate that are not, constituents of, like, New York City obviously captures the entirety of that state. I've driven up there and seen people that were saying, like, vote no on the SAFE Act and all that. Sure, and I was like, man, these people are getting steamrolled. But they live in New York. What are they going to do? But not everybody picks up and moves like a tumbleweed like I do. So,
well, that's one. And two, again, even in New York, the problem is you need to activate the voters who are sitting it out.
Yes.
That's the thing.
And that had never occurred to me.
Activate the voters who are sitting it out.
Yeah.
And those voters are ready to hear a genuinely conservative message, especially if they're Black or Latino voters, because they're going to tend to be more religious. They're going to tend to be more socially conservative, right? It's just that there are certain bad habits of thought that Republicans indulge all the time, and it makes them unattractive. So by the way, circling back to what we were really talking about, my case, right? Think about it. Republicans are supposedly the pro-2A people, right? Okay.
Yep.
How many prominent Republicans have you heard talking about my case?
Dana. Not much more. A little bit on Red State.
Right? I mean, right. Okay. So, and I know, for example, like I've tagged a lot of prominent people, including politicians, in the New York GOP. Like, New York GOP has nothing to lose. They have no exalted position that they might jeopardize if they
That's true.
jumped in on an issue. Okay, so why haven't I heard from Elise Stefanik? Why haven't I heard from Ed Cox? Heard back, I should say, because I reached out to them multiple times. Right? Why haven't I heard from? Hey, speaking of conservatives, right? What's her name? And she might be mad because I'm calling her out. But what's her face? Jesus, what's the guy who has the thing? PragerU, right? PragerU.
You were going to do the thing my wife does with me, where she starts describing something very vaguely, and I got to guess. Okay, so PragerU.
It's the other thing. No, the other thing with the thing.
The one who was in the movie, and you're like,
the thing exactly that time.
By the way, I'm like 98%. I'm 98%.
The movie with the girl in the car, right? The movie with the girl.
Yeah, I'm 98% with my wife on that stuff. By the way, because we have very, very similar, patterns. But
exactly. But no, Susan Prager knows about my case.
Okay.
We DM'd back and forth. We had a very cordial, couple of DMs back and forth. Okay. Have you heard Dennis Prager talk about my case?
I haven't, but to be fair, I don't monitor a lot of Dennis Prager.
I mean, listen, I'm not.
But I assume that you're correct. I will assume that if he did, you would know, and you would have told me. So yeah.
And again, a lot of these prominent conservative or so-called conservative voices, who are like fire breathing on a bunch of these issues, people said, well, maybe they just don't know about your case. When Squeaky went down to Kensington, Philadelphia, right, and to do an act of investigative journalism to inform us that people were falling out behind fentanyl in the streets of Kensington, Philadelphia. It's like, well, my question was, why didn't you go visit Maj Touré? Maj Touré is a black conservative in Philadelphia. He's doing two-way stuff. He's doing free firearms training. He's doing civics classes, doing all this stuff. He's doing conservative content online, right?
Yep.
And I have his phone number. Yeah. I can text him when I want. So you tell me, why does someone who works for a conservative news organization not know about Maj? Well, he does know about Maj Touré. He's not interested.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I
do. I like Maj too.
The conservative movement is not covering itself in glory here. And that's yet another reason why people have no reason to trust them. It's like if one, you don't care when we do conservative stuff in the cities. That's one. And two, you don't you don't bother to speak to us like human beings. And if we do happen to get a conservative politician who comes and wants to run New York City, he starts to run it like a nanny state guy. Well, then what's the point of voting for a so-called conservative?
Right.
I mean, Rudolph Giuliani did not govern like a conservative. I'm very sorry. He governed like a statist.
Heavy hand.
Where was the limited government thing with Rudolph Giuliani? Tell me.
You never see these people get into power and just like roll back all the power of the state. Wouldn't that be something?
Right.
Were you in the space the other day when we were talking about this? I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if we just gave Congress, like, we're like, look, you got 2 years. We're going to run on all your old shitty laws. We're just going to keep operating the U.S. the way it's been. And we're not excited about it, but we're going to do it.
Right.
We're going to do that. And in the next 2 years, what we'd like you to do is create an act, pass it right now, that repeals all federal laws and scraps them, and then spend the next 2 years creating a decent scaffolding without having like all this rickety shit that's held together with duct tape that doesn't make any sense, that you're trying to close loopholes from the 1930s, back when everybody was trying to do transactions with like bags of grain or whatever the hell was going on. Like you can look back to 1913 before we had an income tax in this country.
Yes.
And we had roads.
Yes.
And people ate.
Had roads, right.
And some people had electricity. Not everybody did. I get it. So we've done some things with that, maybe at some expense we didn't like. But we used to be able to do stuff in this country before we started taking everybody's paycheck left and right. Wouldn't it be nice if we just started from scratch and just made this thing work? I'd love to see some politicians campaign on everything is broken. It's basically idiocracy, right? It's like, look, people, I know stuff's all effed up. Like, we got this guy, he's going to straighten it out. Can we just get a couple of smart people in there to just go, this is garbage? Is there still an opportunity to come in and do the things you're talking about in the cities? Is there an opportunity?
There always is, sure.
Okay.
I mean, look, put it this way. In fact, that's where most of the opportunity is. It's in local governance, right? I've often said, that I'm not a Trump supporter, but I've said before that I think Trump, to the extent that Trump, you can look at Trump as a useful president without looking at him as a necessarily wise or prudent president.
He's a populist.
That is to say, he's a table flipper. And sometimes the table needs to be flipped. But that presupposes that someone else is going to come and set the table to right and reset everything and okay, we're going to run things differently in here from now on. I've referred to him as a breacher. You know what that is, right?
Yeah, but if you open that door and no one goes in.
Fourth man on the stack is a breacher. Okay, so he's going to get up there with his battering ram or his hydraulic ram or his little shape charge on the petard or whatever it is, right? And he's going to blow that thing. And then it's like, if everyone else just stands around high-fiving and backslapping with a goofy expression on their faces, you're gonna take that to heart.
Yeah.
You're gonna feel like, hey, what are we doing here?
You're gonna literally probably take fire that way.
Correct, exactly.
Well, and in the same way we talked about that, you talked about there being, who was fighting in the cities, but it's essentially, you can have someone come in and create that chaos, like make that space. But even in jiu-jitsu, even in these these martial arts, you make space. You got to fill that space by moving. You got to do something. It's like, I'm gonna do a hip up, but then I'm gonna slide. I'm gonna use that opportunity to take some momentum there.
Exactly. You can't just do one thing and then I did it.
Yeah. Look how cool it was. I pushed my body.
Exactly.
Up.
Look how cool that and listen. We have to be honest. Much of what the MAGA movement has been doing over the past few years has been like, look how cool. I mean, after Trump got elected, a lot of what MAGA was doing was like, hey, look how cool that was. It's like, listen, there's work to do, people. There's work to do.
Yeah, no time to watch.
Your man breached the door. Get in there and work. Start, taking over, start applying the precinct strategy, start going around and figuring out how to get a broad grassroots that can actually start to take back our structures, our institutions, our republic, But again, I talked about self-worship before. There is a kind of narcissism in despair. There is a kind of a narcissism in saying, yes, it's all over now because things didn't go my way.
I'm so
we
great.
Lost one, and therefore it's all over.
I'm so great, but I wasn't appreciated. So
everything's gonna burn now. Mm-hmm. Really? Because last time I checked, other people in America kept the faith, kept the civic faith, right, under much more trying conditions. Black folks, Black Americans, working Black Americans, kept the faith when essentially ISIS was running the American South. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, going back further, Booker T. Washington started an industrial college for Black people in Alabama, a generation or two after the end of after the Civil War was over. Right?
Wild.
So the idea that now, because they're canceling us on social media. Excuse me?
Yeah, that blows my mind too. It's like that wasn't always there. What did you do before social media? All of America, literally all of America.
They're stealing elections. They've been stealing elections for a while, bro.
Yeah. Talk about, so that just kind of illuminated that little thing, and I want to touch on something you and I talked about privately, your instinct or interest in the monks keeping the lights on when the world went dark. You want to talk about that for a little bit? Because I think I'm gonna put you full screen for a moment, just because I really like that kind of that image.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when I'll talk about when I left the left. It wasn't a one-day thing. It was a kind of a transition period, and there were several kind of milestones. But one thing that happened was that I started really thinking about Christianity. I was raised Episcopal, lost my faith some years ago, and I started to get it back. I started to it was odd. I started to reason my way back into religious faith. It was weird. But one thing that I was very interested in was this idea of the monastic tradition. Like, I began to understand that the Dark Ages weren't as dark as we thought they were. And again, from a lot of reading and listening to my Christian friends and, all this, I started to realize that there was this whole tradition of people who kept the lights on, kept the light of reason on during a dark period in history. I began to realize that we know about Socrates and Aristotle and all these cats because a bunch of Christians sat, by candlelight and wrote out books by hand, while growing all their own food and brewing their own beer. That's pretty hardcore.
It's pretty based.
But it's pretty, but it's not based in a prepper kind of way, because they're like, no, we're we're preserving something. Like, this will continue. You know what I'm saying?
It's like being the outpost somewhere. You're the last outpost for now.
Yeah. Well, you're a lighthouse. That's what you are.
No, that's right.
And the thing about a lighthouse is a warning, right? Its job is to send a warning, but that warning presupposes that there is still something worth preserving, right? That ship has to turn away from the reef, right, or from the sandbar or what have you.
Yeah, it supposes that there's still a ship.
That there's still a ship,
and somebody still cares about not running it aground.
Correct. And that's a kind of faith. But we need that faith, right? Because building things requires faith. I mean, look, doing anything consequential requires faith. It just does. It's an act of faith, as Chesterton said to us, or maybe it was C.S. Lewis, to assume that your reason is an appropriate instrument for understanding the world in the first place. That's an act of faith, right? Okay, so again, I'm not proposing anything new. I don't claim to have invented anything. I just started going back and looking at history and looking at the history of ideas, and it's like, oh, wait a second. There's all this cool stuff in our theology, in Christian theology. There's all this cool stuff in our American tradition. There's all this cool stuff in the Western tradition. you know. And all we have to do is kind of pick up some of these instruments and start to use them. That's all. And listen, I've never told anyone that there was any kind of guarantee or that we're going to turn things around next year. I've gotten into fights with people for saying that we're in a 100-year war. So just settle in and relax, because it's likely that our grandchildren will sit in the shade of the trees we plant. Well, is that not a noble endeavor? Is that not noble to go ahead and plant those trees? What are you saving it for? You know, or do you just want to keep doom scrolling and say everything is lost? And by the way, one of the reasons why young people, so many young people who become disaffected go to the left and not the right, is because the left at least has a story where they're trying to save the world.
Right.
Think about it for a second. Think about it. The left is telling people, come on, we're going to save the planet. Come on, we're going to end race. I mean, now that's bullshit, but I'm saying that's what they're saying.
But they are doing it. Yeah, you're right.
But
No, they're offering a vision.
They're offering a vision. Okay, so as I've said time and time again, you know, if you're a young person and you have a choice between team superhero and team accountant, it's not even a question.
Nope.
Okay, now by contrast, you look at you mentioned Christianity. I talked about it briefly. You know, it's like, actually, that's a really cool story if you just tell it. It's like, yeah, you know, something, the ulterior mind tried to debug the world. So basically he took a part of himself and developed a subroutine and injected it into the system. You know, and that subroutine turned into it was a living virus, and it infected and it rewrote the software of human civilization starting about 2,000 years ago.
And literally changed the values that people look at themselves with. This is the thing that I always tell people, and this is why I think the Socratic method is powerful. But it's a way of debugging leftism, because I don't think leftists are my enemy. I know you don't think they're your enemy.
Well, some of them are.
Some of them act like our enemies individually, but the movement is not my enemy, it turns out, because the thing is that they actually have the same values. They're just off. You know what I think of it as? It's like having a bad zero. It's like
I see what. Yes,
it's like your sights are not aligned properly, and so up close, yeah, we kind of hit the same stuff. But if I take you out to 1,000 yards, you're going to be off the paper. You're going to be off. No impact, no idea. That's where you're at. That's how far off you're. 1 degree. 1 degree at 1,000 yards is a long ways off. But at up close, right. 10 degrees, 10 yards, yeah, we're still hitting the same target. And my thought is this: my assumption is that people, if I get them to tell me that the reason that they think people are valuable is because people have innate worth, because they do think that way. You have to be if you're a leftist, you have to believe in that. There is no Karl Marx without Christianity. There is no values of Karl Marx without Christianity. He just got it wrong at some point.
Well, it's corrupted. Is true. Although I think part of the problem is that I think that's true, but it's also that doesn't necessarily mean that modern leftists are in any way in touch with religion.
I don't think they are either.
Yeah, I think that they've gone in for self-worship. But
they've detached. I agree with you. I'm just saying that if I could root them back to where that comes from, the core beliefs come from that.
I would say I wouldn't take them back to Karl Marx. I mean, I would, like C.S. Lewis said, that it would be an upgrade if young people started to become pagan instead of materialist.
Ooh.
Because that would be a good, look, I've said, and it's not original on my part, that everything's downstream from theology. There is no culture without religion. Sorry, there is no culture without. There's no science without religion.
Yep.
Right now, there was a conservative, a British conservative named Sir Roger Scruton, and he was doing a panel discussion, and someone asked him how we could get young people to who were raised on Lady Gaga and stuff like that to appreciate, let's say, classical music. And what he said was, well, you can't, not directly.
Mm-hmm.
He said, first you have to get them to appreciate silence, and then in that silence, right, the appreciation of other things can blossom. So I think if we could just get, if we get, especially our young lefty brethren, if we could just get them embracing the idea of the sacred, that is the supernatural, right? Yes, we have law, whatever, but there is something the law and the state cannot be the highest value. If we can just get them to admit that there's something else to which law and the state must be subordinate, they don't have to declare for Christ. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying if they could just agree to that, that would be an enormous upgrade. Because at the end of the day, what we need is more people to understand that we have to have, we have to have a hierarchy of values. That's the main thing. I think when I think about what's wrong with society, and not just society, what's wrong with business, what's wrong with American foreign policy, why we can't seem to put together corporations to make decent stuff, and why nothing seems to work well. The answer I come back to is not necessarily the death of Christianity. It's more like the abandonment of hierarchy and the embrace of self-worship. If you understand hierarchy and you're not worshiping yourself, even if you're just like a vaguely skeptical deist like many of the founding fathers were, right? That's better. But if you abandon that and you abandon the idea of a hierarchy and you go toward positive self-worship, you are in a world of trouble, and your society is going to be in a world of trouble. As you were talking, I just pulled up this quote by Chesterton, and I want to read it if you don't mind. It's really interesting. He said, it's from his book Orthodoxy. He said, "The modern world is not evil. In some ways, the modern world is far too good. It is full of wild and wasted virtues. When a religious scheme is shattered, as Christianity was shattered at the Reformation, it is not merely the vices that are let loose. The vices are indeed let loose, and they wander and do damage. But the virtues are let loose also, and the virtues wander more wildly, and the virtues do more terrible damage. The modern world is full of the old Christian virtues gone mad. The virtues have gone mad because they have been isolated from each other and are wandering alone. Thus, some scientists care for truth, and their truth is pitiless. Thus, some humanitarians only care for pity, and their pity, I am sorry to say, is often untruthful."
It's heavy. There's a lot
Chesterton's firing at you all the time.
yeah, nonstop.
Yeah.
But even that silence you brought up a minute ago, that's place to maneuver.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's the table flip.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
It's a more achievable goal because it's incremental.
That's right. That's one.
Everybody
thing
wants to solve it in one fell step. Actually, you know what? This reminds me of something Michael Crichton wrote back in the. He wrote Rising Sun. Was that what it's called?
Yeah, Rising Sun.
Yeah. Is that what it's? Was that? Am I right?
I think it's Rising Sun. Yeah, I think so.
He always had these like really interesting things that he was talking about, like cultural commentary while he was telling a story of like a murder or whatever, telling the story of like an airplane crash. But it was really more, the story there was about the value of incrementalism and why the Japanese were able to destroy, absolutely just devastate American electronics industries in the 80s because they were willing to have a slightly better VCR. They were willing to make a DVD player, or, they didn't have to jump the DVD. They would make a better VCR, then they would make one that had some anti-shock, and then they'd make one that was able to do a couple of more features, and people bought it. They incrementally would sell it. Whereas Americans were like, we need the quantum leap. We need the jump that changes the game, and we're only interested in making that. And if you're only aiming at, we're going to revolutionize the industry, you don't get incrementally better batteries.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You don't get incrementally better politics. You don't get incrementally better policy and incrementally better. We're always trying to say, we're going to flip it on its head. We're going to put in this guy and everything's going to be righteous. It's
right.
Like, that's not how the world works.
Right. And there's a kind of narcissism in that too.
I think so. Yeah. It's cult of personality. You have to believe that, right? You have to.
Well, there's that. And there's also the thing of humbling yourself. Look, in my career as a software guy, right? Sometimes you're lucky enough to go into a place. Now that I'm senior, I kind of have the luxury of being able to go and say, I want to work for startup companies where I'm like the first or second or third engineer, and stuff like that. And I've been lucky enough to do that from time to time. But very often as a software guy, you go in and there's already a bunch of software that's been written, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just the way it is. Okay, now you may find that one or more of the systems in that place are not kind of optimal. You know what I'm saying? There's something in there that's not quite right. Okay, well, the first thing you have to do is humble yourself and not go in there pissing everyone off by saying, oh, all this is stupid and you're doing everything wrong.
Yes.
You have to learn to lead with the question. Okay, oh, I see you're doing that. Okay, why are we doing this like that? What am I missing? You know, it's very important because first of all, you need to get people on your side, people who are willing to talk to you so they can tell you the arcane lore that you're going to have to learn to function effectively in the company. And also, if you want to make an improvement, you're just not going to be able to throw everything away and start. You can't. It's not on the table, right?
This is the same in every team environment and every culture you've ever walked in that exists before you, which, by the way, we've all been born into a culture that existed before us.
So that's what a culture is, right? You're born into it. It
already exists.
Correct.
So you don't get to throw it all out. And that's why my pipe dream of Congress is going to repeal all the laws. They're not going to do that, although they would be better if they did that. They would immediately be better if they scrapped all this garbage because they've done a bad job on it. But that assumes that, like you said, humility. You walk in, and this is my problem with young people that are in their early 20s, because I had a couple of people saying, like, we're trying to get, more young people to politics. Why? What do you know? You have energy. I'm into that.
Right.
And I told this kid, I said, I'm going to give you some feedback. You didn't ask for it, but it's free, so it's worth whatever you got it for. And I said, here's the feedback, and let me share it with you. There is a balance in life between being the young guy who's got tons of energy, you got all the piss and vinegar, you're willing to run down the bad guy, you're going to run for a mile and a half and finally catch your man. And then there's also the old guy who knows exactly where that guy was running, so he drove the car there, and when he comes around the last corner, he falls over the top of the hood. It's a joke in every police movie.
Yes.
Right? Going back to the cops and robbers metaphors. But there's a balance between being knowledgeable enough, wise enough, that you know a lot of the tricks and turns and you understand the wiliness of having some experience, but also having the energy to push into the space and to make some room to move. And there's a balance there. And that balance, I think, happens somewhere between like mid-30s and mid-40s, like early 50s kind of thing. At some point, you don't have that anymore. And then you're Chuck Grassley.
Well, I would say it differently. I would say that's why good organization. Remember, we've defined deviancy down for decades now. Effective organizations for most of human history were cross-generational organizations, right?
Yeah,
effective teams for most of our history as a species were cross-generational teams.
Oh yeah, for sure. There was a council of elders, right? There may have been a younger, more powerful guy who was going to implement it, but he went to the brain trust.
But he went to the brain trust and he said, listen, what am I missing?
Yeah, and they said, we've already tried that shit. We did that when I was younger and everybody died. And I'm the only guy standing.
But you see again how
there's humble. You have to be humble.
You have to humble yourself, and you have to reacquaint yourself with and get good with the concept of hierarchy. This is why I find my Catholic friends so interesting, because right away they're like, nope, there's a hierarchy.
Yeah, we get that. We get that thing.
You get that. And that's very, very, very important. You can't get anything useful done without that hierarchy.
Yep.
So,
and it takes humility to come in at the bottom of a hierarchy. You have to know where you fit in there. I mean, look, every team I've ever been on, if you want to immediately not be effective on that team, go in there and tell people how to do things right away without ever learning what they do. It's like you don't know their culture. You don't know why they do those things. As you said, you come in, you lead with questions. Help me understand what we're doing here. What are the values?
Right.
Why?
And then again, a thing that I really one of the many things I stole from the U.S. military. You lead with service.
That's right.
So I used to one of my jobs in the past. I worked for a company called Take-Two. It's like a gaming company. They're the parent of like Rockstar Games and 2K and all that. So I was a senior data engineer over there, and I was responsible for building this kind of a new system for building a specific category of software. So it wasn't just a piece of software, it was like an entire, So a lot of the junior and mid-level engineers working around me, like they didn't report to me. Like I had to convince them, I had to get them on board, but they didn't have to listen to me. So, I would talk to them. The first thing I'll talk to them respectfully. And the second thing I do is I would talk to them as if I was trying to help them, because I was trying to help them. And so I'd be like, hey, when you get a chance, come do a ride along with me. Jump on a screen share. I'm working on a data pipeline for so-and-so. Come check out this tooling I've got. Maybe you'll think it's horseshit. Maybe you think it's useful, but check it out, because I'm writing data pipelines really fast. And I was able to get them on board because I wasn't browbeating them. I wasn't insulting them. I was like, hey, you know something? I think you will generate more value for the company if you get to sit around and think for longer. Like, you shouldn't have to type so much. Like, your value as an engineer is between your ears, not at the end of your arms. So if you use this tooling, if you use this system I'm designing, you'll be able to sit and think more, and that's good. And they were down with that because that's what software engineers like to do. They signed up to sit and think about problems and then, write a little bit of code, So, it goes back to the whole thing. And by the way, that idea, the idea of leading by service, that's also a very Christian idea.
Yes. Yeah, model the way you want people to see it. What do they say? The best Christian preachers, right? They're always preaching, and some are speaking, some of the time.
Yeah, that's right.
If you want people to, and this is the story. This is the oldest story. It's like, you want to model the behavior you want people to see. When people go like, man, that guy seems like he's really got his shit squared away. What is he doing? What is he all about? Like, why does he do it that way? And then they start asking. That's called getting permission to give people information. And we used to always, I used to do sales, right? So I used to do that, and everybody's always selling. If you don't know, you're in a sales job. We're all in a sales job every day, all the time. Even when I was an FBI agent, when I was a paramedic, it was a sales job. The sales job is, I have a thing that I'm doing, and I want you to be on board with it. And so I got to get your permission to sell it to you. And then you're going to buy in, and your buy-in is a permission for me to actually do the thing that I do.
That's right.
So we're constantly doing that. We're doing that through preaching. Preaching is permission based. You're knocking on a door. You're asking, hey, can I talk to you about this message I have? And people go, no, it's dinner time. It's a bad time. And you go, okay, sorry to have bothered you. What would be a good time to come back? Because then you're always doing the follow up, right? But in the same way, if you're working with those software, the younger minds, you're saying, hey, I got this thing. Would you come take a look at it? Would you be interested? Would you accept my would you accept what I'm doing and take some time with me?
Yes.
Is there value in that? And they go, okay, sure. Yeah, I'd like to come think about that with you. And then
you ask.
You're getting permission. And then you go, would this be of value to you later? And they go, yeah. And you go, can I show you a little more? And they go, yeah, you can.
Right.
So now you've got buy-in, and we're constantly doing that. So we need to be doing this buy-in, I think, again, with the political process as well.
Yes, sir.
The door's open. We've got rooms. It sounds like we have a massive audience of non-turning out voters that we need to get excited about it, which I think is very interesting. And you've turned me to that, which I hadn't thought about previously.
That's right.
And that means that states that are generally thought of to not be in play, that all the great minds think can't be turned.
That's right.
They probably are. I don't think those people are great mathematicians. They may understand how elections have worked based on the structure that exists, but not based on upsetting that structure, which is what you're talking about.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And so, and I think that's right. And look, I think at the end of the day, so you mentioned elections, that's one part of it. That's one half of the picture. The other half of the picture is re-enchanting the world. It is that we have to also it's not just about talking to people about elections. It's about inviting people to reach for a different instrument. That's the phrase I always use. It's about inviting people to reach for an instrument other than government to solve problems,
Which is theoretically what Christians and conservatives keep saying. It's like, hey, you know what a better thing is than giving a bunch of money through some garbage government program that's not well run? How about a bunch of people that volunteer to do it with their own time and their own money? How about we have values and we hold people up and we want to lift them up and we want to do it for the right reason, not because we have our money taken at the point of a gun, which is how taxes work.
Correct. But I will also say that, one thing that conservatives have to fix if they're going to be effective is to get off this libertarian bandwagon, because that's just as bad.
Yeah, explain that, because I think that'll hit people in the eyes.
Well, so look, and I have libertarian friends. I'm not mad at them. I love my libertarian peoples, but libertarianism is a stance. It's not a complete doctrine. Why not? Because if you're going to tell me that man should be free, then my next question is, well, what is man? Is man just a species of talking meat? Is man just an accident? Because if man is an accident, or if he's talking meat, or if he's just a collection of atoms, there's no particular reason why man should be free. There's no particular reason why you should respect man. I mean, I have lots of collections of atoms here in my studio, right? And I can do what I want with them.
Mm-hmm.
I can throw them away. I can throw them in the fire. Okay? So my Christian friends who are libertarian, they have a complete doctrine because they started with an operating system, right, that prescribes the proper relationship between man and other things in the world and above it, so to speak.
And then they run a
saying?
program of libertarianism on top of it.
And then you can now you can run that libertarianism routine on that Christian operating system.
Yeah.
Correct. Because the operating system is telling you what goes where and how to put first things first and so on and so forth. But you just can't say, well, I don't, man's an accident. We're all just animals, but you should be free.
Yeah, it lacks
Why?
it lacks that one word. You just said it. Why? You said it three or four times, so I was going to hone in on that.
Yeah,
but that's
yeah,
what it lacks. It's like,
and to zone in specifically, right? Some of these things, the problems we have to solve are not amenable to sound bites. I'm very sorry. In some cases we need less government. In some cases, the problem is we didn't have enough government. I'll give you an example. We had a financial crisis, a housing crisis. Remember? And the problem, our so-called conservative brethren said at the time that the problem with the 2008 housing crash was dumb black people getting subprime mortgages. Now, that wasn't the problem at all, but that's how they get down. The problem is that we allowed people to do crazy stuff with derivatives. We invited them to play with financial nitroglycerin, as Warren Buffett called it, and to sprinkle that all over everyone's portfolio in the form of these CDOs, these derivatives, basically.
Yep.
And derivatives are very dangerous. I mean, they're a very useful technology, but if you have no controls, you can get very bad results very quickly. I'll never forget one of the oldest and most kind of like revered trading firms in Britain, a firm called Barings PLC, was taken out in the course of a weekend by one guy trading derivatives on a desk in Singapore. So these things are not to be messed with. Okay, now, so we had a law, a regulation in place that said that retail banks are not allowed to make high risk investments, not allowed to play with derivatives in that way, right? It was called Glass-Steagall. It's a firewall between high-risk finance and retail banking, because retail banking, bank accounts, right, have a federal backstop. They're insured by the FDIC. Okay. So someone dismantled that firewall. And as a result, retail banks were able to play with financial nitroglycerin. Yeah. And as a result, the effects of that crash when it happened were much worse than they had to be. Now, was that a case of too few regulations or too many regulations? Well, in that case, it was like we dismantled a regulation we should have kept.
right.
You see, we keep missing, because we don't have the correct logos, we keep missing the point about scale that people like Chesterton and Belloc got very well. And for that matter, a lot of older generation conservatives from a century ago kind of understood, which is that scale matters, which is that capitalism works best when there's lots of small capitalists. But that requires a state that is, at the very least, going to clamp down on economic rent seeking.
What do you think about the whole situation when the whole too big to fail arguments were made? And my whole thought was, it's supposed to fail, and then a bunch of small investors are supposed to come in and buy up the means of capital and start new experiments that are more nimble. That's the whole point.
Well, sure, but not if it's bigger than a certain amount. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, yes, you're right, but here's the problem. You can't let a company get so big that its failure would be a systemic threat to the economy, because when it gets to that point, it doesn't matter how libertarian that politician is. It doesn't matter how much Hayek or Milton Friedman or Adam Smith he's read. He's not going to do nothing. The political imperative to just do something will be too great. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So the answer is yes, companies that do bad things or that handle money badly or make bad investments are supposed to fail. But companies must not be allowed to get so large that their failure would be a systemic threat to the economy. Because by the time they get that big, like, no politician will let them fail. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry. That's utopian thinking.
Agreed.
They will step in. Okay. So that's the thing. You know, why are there so few banks in America? Why are there not 100,000 different banks? Because there's too much of a regulatory burden on banking. Okay, so reasoning from first principles, not trying to say just deregulate everything, but thinking rationally. Well, is there a tier? Is there a banking tier that we can have where things can be more fast and loose? And can we preserve? Can we still preserve security for people who just want to put their money somewhere and know it's going to be there the next day?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to really start reasoning kind of more deeply about this stuff, because again, our systems are complex, and some of the problems that we have are complex problems, and most solutions to complex problems are wrong.
Yeah, that checks. And also it makes sense that people that are interested in software would be a really good group of people to talk to about this problem, because there's a lot of similarities. There's subroutines, there's primary routines, there's there's a lot of different outputs that are also getting regenerated back as inputs, and
Yes,
and they're going into other places within that same sort of like I said, my understanding of code is cursory at best. I did some Java, I did some C++, and I was terrible at all of it, but I understand the principles of it. I can look at it and see, okay, that's what this thing's doing and putting out. And we're dealing with a massively complex system with a lot of inputs, a lot of outputs, and a lot of variables that change regularly.
Yes, sir.
So if that's the case, this is not a simple. This is why I always feel like the sort of the leftism, like, well, we're saving the world, we just got to stop carbon. You know what's funny?
That's right, that's right.
And this is
Stop
another
plant food.
Yeah.
Plant food.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, this is a conversation for another day, but I always feel like the CIA does single factor analysis all the time too. It's like, oh, our guy is, this is the problem. We'll just kill that guy. We create power vacuums over and over again, like they've never seen it happen before. And you just keep thinking, like, guys, this is not a simple system. This is an entire society. They have an entire ethos. There's a way of life that was created. That person is integral to it. And you think just like cutting off the head of something and something new is going to grow back that you like, and that's going to change the bottom? Like, no. You just, it's so weird.
What's fascinating about you saying that is I was just reading this Substack it's called Gaius Baltar's Substack. And I think he said something that was very similar. It's like we have these people who just want to look at one thing and they want to fixate on, it's part of the progressive mindset. I did a space a while ago where I talked about the progressive mindset. It was me and my friend Sean, who co-hosts the Hidden Path conservative space series with me. And one of the things I was saying was, the conservative mindset is characterized by three things. The conservative mindset wants to analyze, right? It wants to eradicate and wants to subjugate. So if you think about analysis, right, it's like the conservative mind wants to dissect something and try to understand it based on its parts in isolation. But that just doesn't work. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like it's not.
No, yeah, you can't do that.
You can't. You can't. You can do that if you want to understand that part. But to understand how that part actually functions, it's just not that simple.
Correct.
And we've kind of decided that I don't know, we want it to be that simple, or maybe it's another form of narcissism. Like we think, yeah, I should be able to understand this, or I've focused on this for 10 years, so this is the answer. But I mean, look, I see this with some of these PayPal conservatives that happen to be obsessed with race and IQ. They're like, well, race and IQ, IQ. Listen. It's true that you have to have higher than a certain baseline ability to manipulate abstract ideas if you want to, for example, write software. But it's also true that once you pass that threshold, additional points don't necessarily buy you any additional capability. because past that threshold, now other things start to be more important, like your ability to communicate, your ability to write a good document, your ability to think about how I should word this error message that I'm writing into my code, so the next guy who comes and is trying to use my horseshit code can see what the hell is going on without spending 15 minutes running down blind alleys.
Let's break it into a different analogy. Check this out. It's like you can increase the horsepower of an engine to a certain point, but if your transmission and you don't have enough friction at the wheel, you're spinning tires. So who cares?
You're spinning tires, exactly.
And there's a
rubber meets the road.
And there's a lot of that in history of really, really smart people that get zero things done because they're so smart they can't transmit it. So there's other factors in that problem, and I agree with you 100% on all of that.
Right. I mean, who was smarter, like Robert Oppenheimer or Leslie Grove? Well, I think Oppenheimer was smarter, but like you wouldn't have had a Manhattan Project without Leslie Grove, and Oppenheimer wasn't the guy to build the Manhattan Project. He couldn't have done it.
Think about all the people out there that have come up with theoretically amazing ideas, and it takes like some high school education machinist to be able to turn it into reality.
That's exactly.
And if you don't have respect for all the parts in the machine, then you're also a fool. Like you've got to respect the person that can theorize it. You've also got to respect the person that has the hard skills to turn it into reality. I used to go down to the machine shop in the engineering school at Oklahoma, and I remember one time something just blew me away. And you see somebody that's really, really good at their trade, and I love tradesmen. Like I just think that's such a such a lost value that you don't look at like a journeyman in a trade, and you're like, this person is where the rubber meets the road.
That's right.
I brought this guy a threaded piece. And I wanted to match the threads onto this tiny little pipe that I had.
Right.
And he looked at it and he goes, musical application?
Oh.
And I was like, yeah, this threads into the bottom of into a microphone. How did you know that? And he was like, man, when you've been around machine threads for as long as I have, like you just know that there are certain common threads that you can eyeball and you know what they're used for.
Wow.
I was like, holy shit, that is freaking cool, right? If you showed somebody a piece of pipe that was threaded on the end and he goes, that's a musical application.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
That's awesome.
And that was probably like a no-brainer for him. He just like that was just, that was like if I held you up a hamburger and you're like, that's a burger. Like that's how easy that was for him.
That's right. And by the way, it's not clear to me that, of course, he has... You would assume he has a certain ability to manipulate abstract ideas, because that's kind of what machinists do when they think about jigging something up and they think about tool holding and the mental modeling, how machining out some keyway in a piece of metal is going to change the metal and the whatever, and the stress is granted. But like that thing where you could just say, oh yeah, music, that's a thing for a mic stand or whatever. It's not clear to me that you can measure that capability using IQ or any other particular metric.
There's like a visual recognition there. It's like somebody who can shoot that may be dumb as a brick, but they can hit a target that's moving at, they're doing calculus in their head that is following a parabolic arc that is, dealing with gravity and some, some shape that is catching the air differently, and there's smoke. You're like, I don't know. Hitting a baseball out of the park. Like, do you have to be brilliant? No, but you've got to have you have to have a three-dimensional view of the world that you're conceptualizing and your hands are able to do the thing that your mind imagines and you're transmitting it into reality. So yeah, again, horsepower, we always talk about intellectual horsepower. My buddies and I use this word. And that's just the raw ability to grab data and ideas and work them. And I have some friends with a really, really high degree of intellectual horsepower.
Yeah.
But not all of them can get anything done in the world.
Correct. This is very important.
And like I said, where the rubber meets the road is somebody who's got good transmission. You've got to be able to take that horsepower and move it through and turn it into an actual functional, friction-based propulsion. It's got to go somewhere if you want it to do something.
That's right.
And we all need a little bit of all of that. Like, I love having super smart people that go, what about all these problems? And you go, yeah. Okay, we're just going to do something. And this is the thing we're going to do, right?
It's going to brute force it, right?
Yeah, thank you for thinking of all the problems. We're going to muddle through it. And then, by the way, I'm going to need you to troubleshoot it as we go.
That's right.
Because we're going to do something.
That's exactly right.
Otherwise, we just sit there and we do analysis paralysis, which is what I call it.
Well, that's right. But as you bring that up, I just tonight I was working on this project. Shout out to Dana Lash, who is one of the real ones. She gave me an interview. She gave me a mic to talk about my case, and her husband Chris Lash is mad cool. And so, apropos of what we've just been talking about, like I've been working on this.
Hold on, let me put you full screen. Okay, what do we got here?
Yeah. Okay, so Chris Lash was working on we were DMing back and forth, and he talked about the need to do shot registration at a shooting range, right? So he'd have the scenario he painted for me roughly was you've got some training software, right, that's doing something, it's running on a phone or on a laptop or whatever, and somehow like you need to register the fact that a particular shooter with a pistol actually fired his weapon at such and such a time.
Okay.
Right. So just taking that idea, we were talking back and forth, and he said at one point, he said, well, maybe we could I've been thinking about a way to profile the sound of a shot. Could you write some software that could fingerprint could do the sonic fingerprint of a particular gunshot? And I said, well, maybe, but I'm a big skeptic about so-called AI and things like that. And two, it just seemed to be too much of a heavy lift. The sonic transient is way short, and
also there's interruptive sounds. That's always like the sound waves get interrupted as they move. Yeah. Okay, I'm with you.
So I started thinking, and I came back to him and I said, hey, listen, maybe we brute force this problem. And maybe what we do is we have a little thing that's worn on the shooter's wrist or on his sleeve, and there's an accelerometer, and there's a microphone. And the accelerometer will pick up the recoil transient. The microphone will pick up the shot report. And those two correlated together in time will tell you that particular shooter fired his weapon. I mean, you'll hear the mic will pick up other shot reports because you're in a shooting range.
Right, but if there's not the signature of recoil that goes on in the accelerometer, then it doesn't happen.
Then it doesn't happen.
Sure.
Exactly. So this is part one of that. I'm calling it Osiris. I told him I'd work on it and work it up, and then I'd open source it, so that if I go to prison, someone can still pick up the code and use it. So basically, this is.
Do you want to know something that's crazy? Garmin already has accelerometers built into their watches.
I'm sure they do. Yeah,
I
looked at some Garmin watches, but my thing is you'd have to buy a Garmin watch. This prototype platform, like this, you're looking at maybe $30 worth of parts.
Okay.
Here. Like that's it. Right?
Yeah. Hold on, let me put it back full screen again. There it goes.
Yeah. So basically, this is the accelerometer chip. Right.
Okay.
This is a single board computer. Basically, it's an Arduino, but it's made by a company called Adafruit, and this is designed to be sewed onto clothing. I think this whole thing, this little single board computer, is like $14, right? So I just essentially spun up a little bit of code. Hang on a second. I'm going to share the screen here. Let's see. Can I share that screen? Can I do that? No, wait a minute. One second. I know what I need to do. I need to open up this window. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen.
Maybe.
Share the window. Yes, I will.
Okay, you're sharing a window, so let me grab it. I can grab it from here and throw it on. 1 second here, okay?
Okay, cool. Yep.
Okay. Bear with me a moment.
No problem.
I'm betting I can put it in guest 2. Let's do it here. Okay, and I'm going to keep that muted, and I'm going to open that. Let's see if we can make this happen here. All right. Oh, now you're muted. Hold on. Talk.
Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Got it. Okay, we're on it.
Okay. So if you can see that
my guest, Mike, I didn't set up for another guest, so let me pull off this
shit.
Garrett Boyle. There we go. All right, there's your code.
Okay, so can you see the code isn't important because it's like copy pasta mostly. It's not very complicated. It's just polling the accelerometer is all, and saying, hey, what, right? But if you look at the bottom half of the screen, you should see numbers scrolling by, right?
Yep.
XL, X, Y, Z, right? So and you notice, and so I don't know if people can see, but when I jerk when I twist it one way or another, the numbers change in a certain way, and that tells me that the x-axis is the one I'm interested in. That's the transient. So basically, this accelerometer goes on the person's wrist. So does this. The whole thing probably gets sewn onto a kind of a sleeve or a glove, a shooting glove with a long sleeve, so all the parts can be in one place. But basically, this is the beginning of Osiris, open shot registration system. And so that is, if I can do this. And I can add a mic, and I'll show you. I actually bought a miniature. mic. It's like here. See, like this.
Let me get your full screen here. There it is.
Yeah,
no, your full screen. There's your full screen.
Yeah, so this is the miniature mic right here.
Nice.
So very small. So everything just goes on a glove or a sleeve or what have you, and you pick up the recoil transient, you pick up the sonic transient.
Oh, I lost all of them. Hold on, I got to get you back. That's what I get. I tried to hang up on his extra screen, y'all. We'll get the top back in here again. That's classic. Right when he's telling me his cool invention. In any case, you guys can kind of see what was going on with that little piece of tech, which is pretty neat. We'll get my man Dexter back here in just a second, and we'll wrap this sucker up because I think that there he is. Hold on, we got to get some audio unmuted.
Check 1 2.
There he is. All right, brother. I disconnected from your share screen, but it knocked out both of you.
Oh yeah. So yeah, this plus the accelerometer plus a single board computer and then I bought a Wi-Fi chipset. So again, another very small part. You can power the whole thing with like a 9-volt battery pack or whatever, and then it should be able to transmit those. When it does a shot registration, it can just transmit that chunk of data to whatever shooting platform, whatever training platform you. Like I don't care what you're using.
Yeah, but if you're using like Mantis X or something like that, running across a bunch of different people, you can see all these different shooters doing Mantis X on one set, something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
So fun stuff. But I mean, but all that by way of saying that, like, sometimes you want to burn a lot of CPU to get something done. Other times you're like, no, just brute force it. Like try something simple. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff I love, and this kind of stuff. If New York State wasn't messing with my life, I'd be doing kind of like all the time, like developing products and tech and yeah, I love this.
And what's more American than finding something you love, doing your hobby on it, and trying to improve it for the next generation? Like that's kind of what it's all about. Let's give people just an overview of what we're expecting in the next little bit, what you guys had in your opening statements, and then we'll wrap this sucker up since we've been going at it for a little bit. But
sure,
I think people need to follow this case. So first of all, I've been throwing it on the screen left and right, so I'll throw it again. That is your handle on Twitter where people can follow you and they can see the updates. It's Future Radio Cast, all spelled out. Future Radio Cast. All right, Dexter, give them the lay of the land for this court situation.
Yeah. So this was week 1, basically. I was raided in April of 2022. There've been a lot of delays, back and forths. For a while, we were waiting on data from the NYPD. We filed a motion to dismiss on Bruin grounds, and that required us to get certain data. We filed a FOIA request. We got that data. I wrote the code to transform that data so my legal team could do analytics on it. That's also open source, by the way. But long story short, here we are. We did jury selection. It took about a week or so for us to get a jury, to impanel a full jury. So we finally seated the last juror, the last alternate this week, and we started opening arguments. We did opening arguments on Thursday, I believe. And I have to say, so far, look, I don't want to jinx myself by gloating over the mistakes of my adversary, but so far the prosecution has not covered itself in glory. The fix is definitely in. It's clear that New York State, that the court itself is kind of inclined to put its finger on its thumb on the scale, right, on the side of the prosecution. So, for example, they struck the prosecution struck every strong black male figure from the jury panel. My jury panel is mostly women and 3 white guys. Now, taking nothing away from my white brethren, it's supposed to be a jury of my peers. I would have liked to see 1 or 2 working class black guys. That would have been nice.
One would think.
There was one guy that they struck who literally, he worked at a law firm. He was like a copy center guy, copy center technician in a law firm downtown. He had a brother in Homeland Security and another one in the police. We liked him. The prosecution struck him. Again, strong black guy. Couldn't have that. Anyway,
That's
I
wild.
like this jury. I actually like the jury we got. Because they're ordinary New Yorkers, like most of them, they're working people. They're women who have to like get on the subway every day. Do you know what I'm saying? Like they're people who understand, the people who go home every night and like look at the news and see the craziness happening in our city. And the prosecution has to persuade them to look at me and say, yeah, put this guy away for 18 years. He's dangerous because he was making things.
Right. With the opportunity cost is that we're going to waste all of our time running after Dexter, but we're not going to go and fix your subway problems where we got this going on. We're not going to spend our energies doing things that, that are going to really materially affect you. But this guy who was making stuff in his house and never left with him.
Right. Exactly.
That's real scary.
Yeah. So
that's a tough sell. I got to sell to like even to people that think guns are bad.
Right. That's a pretty tough sell.
It's like you're what, 51, 52 years old?
Yeah, 53. Yeah.
53.
It's like
53 years on the planet, no real problems with guns, guns that never left his house,
No
tinkering
record,
on stuff. Has some pretty interesting ideas that he wants to share with people. You don't have to agree with him or not, like whatever. Not causing any problems. He's just your neighbor.
Right.
And you got neighbors that like you, I think, right? It sounds like
neighbors. Yep, I got neighbors that like me. My upstairs neighbor, he's mad cool.
You're not doing desk pops down there in your apartment, like being a menace to society.
Jesus. No.
You're looking at buying land in New Hampshire like some kind of radical, but other than that,
don't start with
how many people in New York are thinking like, yeah, I'd like to have a place somewhere up in the whatever's north of New York. They don't really know what's up there. They never leave, but they've gone to the country once or twice on a weekend or something, right?
Yeah. Well, my ex-wife's family used to have a place in New Hampshire. And it's like a family vacation place up in the, but that was like further north in New Hampshire. It was a very long drive. But when I was thinking, and it was great up there, and that was one of the times we went up there was damn, I lost my train of thought. Anyway,
that's all right. It's relative freedom up there in New Hampshire.
It's relative freedom.
It's not Texas. Let's just be real, but it's
not Texas. Well, no place is Texas. And don't get me wrong, I like Texas.
I got to tell you the last little thing about Texas and New York, because there's a connection there. There's a bridge, right?
Okay, tell me.
So my wife's from Brooklyn, right? And she got friends from New York that would get married. We were going to weddings and stuff, and I played this game called Not Only But Also.
Okay.
I made it up. It's a game I made up. With New Yorkers only. It's only New Yorkers because they're the best.
Nerd.
Yeah, so New Yorkers would come up to you and they'd go, hey, man, I heard you're from Texas. I go, yeah, that's true. And they would go, man, I heard in Texas everybody's got a gun. And I was like, not only that, but also there's a $50 a year household fine if you don't own a gun. I'm like, obviously we can't enforce it. We don't go knocking on doors or anything crazy. I'm just saying it's on the books though. And people would be like, that's so crazy. And they would get so excited about it, because New Yorkers are real enthusiastic. And somebody else would come up later on. They go, hey Kyle, I heard you're from Texas. Yeah, that's true. I heard people still ride horses to work in Texas. Not only that, but also every single publicly funded building has to have a hitching post out in front of it. Now, mostly these things are ornamental at this point, and they're kind of just a thing they do for show. But I'm just saying, it's out there. It's on the books. You got to have it. And that's crazy. New Yorkers are susceptible to the not only but also Texas myth. But I used to laugh because the things that New York holds true about itself are more or less actually true in Texas about a lot of the things.
Yeah.
So there's that, and that's actually a kinship. That's not a rivalry.
Yes,
there's an affinity there and sort of a love. So I always find that New Yorkers that come to Texas, they fit in more than they think they will, because there's a sense there of belonging.
Well, I wanted to. I'm glad you mentioned this because I've been thinking about this for a long time. People forget that this supposed schism between city dwellers and country people is a very recent thing. It's a very artificial thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in other words, put it this way. Remember, I grew up in New York City, right? In the 70s and 80s, I mean, I remember, what decade was that? Dukes of Hazzard. Like there was certain, like all of us of all colors used to get in front of the TV on Friday nights or whenever, because we wanted to see him jump the General Lee.
That's right.
We didn't care that there was a Confederate battle flag on the roof. We could not have cared less. We wanted to see him jump that
There's
car.
a flying car, and we're watching.
It's a flying dude. Come on, there's car chases and cops, and looks like there's dudes like distilling moonshine.
Yeah, they're running liquor.
Running liquor, getting the better of the cops.
Yep.
What is not to? And
everybody's on board,
girl, right? Come on,
done.
And there used to be a comedian named Jerry Clower, the mouth of the South. He was this white cat from Liberty, Mississippi. He used to rock shows all over the country, including in cities like in New York City, Madison Square Garden. He was immensely popular. New York City had a country and western music radio station when I was growing up. It's called WHN. So I grew up listening to kind of funk and R&B and country music. So I know about like Mel Tillis and Merle Haggard and Emmylou Harris and Willie Nelson and like Waylon Jennings and like, outlaw country and all that stuff. Like, and so this, I very much resonate with what you're saying about, there being this, not being as much of a chasm between New York City and Texans, for example, as people would think. I mean, what's his name? Hank Williams Jr. wrote a song called "Country Boys Can't Survive," and one of the lyrics is like, "I had a good friend in New York City. He never called me by my name, just hillbilly. My grandpa taught me how to live off the land, and his taught him to be a businessman." He used to send me pictures of the Broadway nights, and I'd send him some homemade wine.
Yeah.
And when it's like, as a kid, I was like, I want to taste some homemade wine. It's like, what is that? But anyway,
everybody's interested in the thing that they don't have near them, but it doesn't mean they fear it or they hate it. There's a natural American curiosity towards the thing that is not. That's why people who live in the city want to have a country house.
That is exactly,
and that's why people who are from the country want to go hang out and live in the city when they're kids.
Check out the city, see what's going on there.
I mean, how many young people come in and move to Los Angeles and New York when they're young, and they're from somewhere in the middle of nowhere, like they're in the middle of Iowa, and they grew up on a farm, and they want to go make it as something, and they realize, like, you know what, I'm actually going to go raise my kids back where I came from. I like that better. And city people do the same thing. They go, look, I know the city, or maybe they don't. Maybe they say, oh, I resonate here because my values have moved. Because the values that I believe are not here in the city anymore. It doesn't mean that their values didn't used to be there. So anyway, I don't think we're all that dissimilar. I think there's a lot more connection in this country than there. It just takes a couple of people talking about it.
That's right. And I think our so-called leaders are terrified of us kind of bridging that gap and just talking to each other and reasoning with each other. I think that people like me, talking to people like you, talking to people like my friends from down south or from other red states or what have you, they're terrified that we're going to start kind of reasoning about what's happening to us as Americans and look at each other and be like, wait a minute, hang on a second. Somebody doing something slick.
Somebody convinced America that they're not the good guys. And you know what? That's the thing that I want to conserve. And my buddy said it the other day best. My buddy Mark Naughton was like, I want to preserve and conserve, or at least try to regain that sense that we thought we were a moral force for good because we were actually doing good. We believed we were doing good. Even if we were misled, we were still trying to do good. And America always saw itself as an underdog. An underdog is inherently going against something that's harder.
Yes,
it's like,
that's right.
And even if that thing that's hard is like just the tide of humanity always going the wrong direction. It's like America was trying to swim upstream, always has. If we got back to that, we got to the point where we were like, we're the bad guy because we had all the things.
Well, I think, I mean, to be fair, I think the imperial project is part of that. I think the imperial project corrupts, will corrupt the soul of a country. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like Rome started to go wrong when it became an empire. Because the imperative of empire was to keep expanding, and then they had to like, debase their currency and hire mercenaries and doing all this stuff. So it's like, if we could get back to our logos, our secular logos and our Christian logos, if we could dispense with the imperial project, I think we could start to really turn things around in this country. And, I make no warrant as to how long that'll take.
Oh, I think it'll take a long time. Yeah, I think you're right. But that's okay.
Which is fine.
You don't get fat overnight. You don't get lean overnight. It's a process. Right. And we have gotten to the point where this country is addicted to comfort, but that's to say that we are cursed with abundance.
Yes.
And so that's the imperial project you're talking about. That abundance comes from, and then once you do that, once you're chasing abundance, because that's what you think is standard. Yeah. That's okay. 7 lean years. We can make that happen.
That's right.
We might be in that. We might be seeing that whether we like it or not. All right.
Right.
I hope you will keep updating us about the court thing. Where can people follow the best place to follow the updates on the court case?
Well, I mean, I try to do a space.
They got to sign up for Twitter. They got to.
They got to be on Twitter, unfortunately. But I try to do a space every night or so, just saying how things went in court. This next week is not going to be very interesting. The prosecution is going to be bringing the evidence, right? Like all my weapons that I built, my weapons parts, so on, and entering them into evidence.
That's going to sting a little bit.
Well, yeah, like, see, it stung. They started doing that yesterday, and that did sting. Seeing all my babies up there, I'm like, because the bailiff would bring the exhibit over to our table, and I'd be like, okay, that's Alpha. Okay, that's Diana. That's the rifle I built for my daughter. That's Epoch. That's the experimental polymer carbine I built to try to, because I was interested in certain design characteristics of polymer lowers. And it's like, damn. Like the state's got him, and I might have to sue him to get him back, assuming I stay out of prison. But It is what it is. We are where we are, and put it this way: I'm reconciled to this fight. Whichever way this goes, whichever way this trial goes, like this is going to change things. And I'm, as you know, I'm in it to win it. I mean, that the state offered me a plea deal for 8 years instead of 18. I turned it down.
Got to.
So it's like, let's go. By the way, before we go, what was funny in the opening, in the pretrial festivities, the prosecution had big problems with a lot of stuff. They had a problem with the fact that I was doing social media. I was talking about the case. They tried to get the judge to admonish the defense. She slapped them down twice. They told a big, hairy lie in open court that me and my lawyer got into an elevator with two prospective jurors. And I guess they forgot that the elevators have cameras in them. So that was interesting. They didn't even like the fact that I interacted with my family. The first day this week, like my parents came, my upstairs neighbor came, his girlfriend, their friends, and I was greeting my people in the hallway, and we were just, loving on each other, what have you. And the prosecution did not like that at all.
Well, you're supposed to act guilty is what they want.
I'm supposed to act guilty. That's correct.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not going to exult in whatever errors they make, because that's bad juju. But I will say that we so far we have no cause to be particularly uneasy, aside from the fact that we're in this mess in the first place.
Yeah, horrible fight for a lot of the marbles. Maybe not all of them.
Yeah,
but a lot of them.
Yeah, a lot of them. Yeah. So yeah, follow my Twitter, Future Radiocast on Twitter, and yeah, that's it.
Dexter.
Oh, I do have a give, send, go.
Yep.
I don't really push
I think. Hold on. Do I have that saved? I had it.
Yeah.
I grabbed it. I know I did. You know what? It's in the show notes, folks.
Okay, it's in the show notes.
So the link. Yeah, the link is in the show notes, and also the link for the Twitter, so you can find both of them there. And I know it's in your Twitter bio. People can find it there.
Link to it is in my Twitter bio.
Yep. I'm like, I know. I was like, I wouldn't gather that. I know I grabbed it. But
yeah. But I try not to push that too hard, because I'm broke, but I also know that a lot of other people are struggling as well. I'm grateful to everyone. I'm grateful to people who just pray for me, who just send good vibes out for me. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Amen.
Yes, sir.
All right, brother. We'll talk again real soon, and thanks for spending the last 2.5 hours with me, kind of cutting it up on all the topics that people can see. You get a good sense of what it is. Make sure you guys are following Dexter, and we will see you again on Monday morning for the next non-Saturday night special version. This has been a pretty special offering, and Dex, thanks for being on it, bud.
Thanks, brother.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap it all up. I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday. I will see you again Monday morning, first thing. No ads, no commercialization of this story. Just an important story for you guys to hear. And we'll see you again. God bless. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.